Chapter 271, Fall of Volkihar, Part 4, Guardians of the Dawn. A splash of red flashes next to my right eye as I barely dodge the rapid swing of Harkon's blade, the damned thing easily cutting into my mask with barely any resistance. I channel a spontaneous blast of sunlight next to me, but he is already moving on to his next target as he simply continues his swing, now aiming it at Valerica's neck. Numerous iron spikes are risen from the ground with the barest twitch of the vampire matriarch's fingers, positioned perfectly for Harkon to barrel into them, her other hand already holding a fully charged chain of lightning aimed straight for his head. As swiftly as the spell is actualized, did Harkon turn himself into a coud of bats, many of them getting completely destroyed in the ensuing explosion, but a short moment later, the vampire lord appears meters away, grunting in pain as the feedback strikes him, yet he still manages to duck as another sun-hallowed arrow rends the wall behind him into purified magicka. He twists to the side, just in time to reposition his blade and block Serana's flurry of claws, each connection of the two weapons shaking the increasingly structurally unsound chapel around us. The rapid skirmishing battle continued for a while longer, none of us stopping our assault for even a moment as Harkon was forced on the defensive each time he tried lashing out against one of us. Seemingly tired of being outnumbered, he allowed Serana's strike to send him flying back and snarled, "My lord, Molag Bal, I need more power." The Lord of Domination was all too happy to deliver as I felt his altar pulse with power, the strength of my blood lashing out against it almost on instinct as I forced Molag to expend more and more power to send his Dremora through the breach. I share a quick look with my allies, and as one we decide to have Valerica and my shades deal with that, while Serana and I focus on taking Harkon down. The chapel is further ruined by the veritable sea of alterations and demons attempting to bury each other in their sheer weight. Once again, Harkon evades my point-blank shot and lashes out with his sword, forcing me to summon my own blade and block the attack, allowing the strength of the blow to launch me away to gain some distance, even as my fingers screamed at me due to the strain. Serana was naturally not far behind, as she immediately punished him with a slash to the back of the head, a slash that to my great annoyance healed nearly instantly. Seeing as I would not be able to hit the motherfucker anytime soon, I eschew the bow and summon Magnus's staff, bombarding each and every spot he could ever have appeared with golden fire now that I was back in my element. But the fucker just wouldn't stop moving. Each and every one of his wounds, even those caused by literal sunfire, was healed just as quickly as it was created. And as much as I tried dampening Molag's power, it would not work immediately, even if the rapist fuck would pay a massive price to Akatosh after everything was said and done. Deciding to up the ante, I tapped into Azura's star and started imbuing my attacks with soul energy. Harkon immediately turned more cautious, and was even more reluctant to leave himself open for attack, now that the damage I dealt actually stuck for a while. He once again appeared right next to me, but the idiot forgot that he wasn't the only one with Daedric help on speed dial, as Mephis materialized next to him, and I felt the ebony blade disappear from my inventory. Faster than even Harkon could react, the Daedric incarnation jammed the blade into his neck, sucking out a damn near mountainous amount of life force and tossing the knife at me before winking and disappearing, her nature not permitting her to risk Akatosh's wrath any further. Harkon snarled in pain as he retreated to Molag's altar, a massive bubble of blood surrounding him as he attempted to recharge his strength straight from the source. But in his panic, he left himself open to attack. Serana was already slashing at his protection while using all manner of magic to try and penetrate it at the same time. I had other ideas, pulling power from both the life force in the ebony blade and the light souls in Azura's star. I channeled all of it into the bow that had once again appeared in my hands. With no further preamble, I yanked Serana back, my telekinesis long since usable without any gesticulation, and aimed the outright blinding golden arrow at Harkon. He was already moving. Even if the sudden cessation of his healing would backlash at him hard, he would still be able to avoid the arrow and the death it brought. Too bad I was not aiming for him. My left hand lowered ever so slightly, and I felt the Daedra watching from those cruel carved eyes tense, and then I loosed the arrow at Molag's altar. The burning projectile practically teleported to its destination, the trail of gold behind it, outright ending the numerous Dremora still bogged down by Valerica's masterful use of terrain. The moment it touched the altar, however, I heard the most beautiful sound of all. Molag Bal howling in pain, the altar held for the briefest moment and then shattered into pieces, sending fragments flying in every direction as the explosion of power from within shattered the very walls of the chapel. Harkon was flung back and toward the sea, while the rest of us found ourselves glued to the ground. The impact rattled me so hard I could feel a number of my bones cracking as I slid head first toward the sealed gateway behind us, though I was thankfully saved from being outright skinned by the friction due to my armor. Ignoring the searing pain and the sudden lack of control I had over the left side of my body, I flung myself up with telekinesis and smashed a potion bottle on a pillar next to me, forcing the fluid through both my mouth and nose. It was one of the most disgusting things I ever experienced, but I could at least stop limping by the 5th second as I searched for the others. Valerica and Serana already being long gone, as they regenerated just as quickly as Harkon did. By the 10th second, I felt a pop in my head, and my sight returned as the concussion I didn't even realize I had was healed away. Immediately I summoned Scorch and jumped on his back, cursing the spike of pain in my leg as I did. We flew outside at immense speeds, my right hand already moving as my left channeled the staff of Magnus. The moment the light touched us, I let loose a massive fireball, the very air burning in its wake as it struck a grinning Harkon in the back, blasting him into the water and muffling his scream of surprise and pain. And just in time, as well as I saw Valerica retreat behind me, both of her hands missing and her flesh already growing in a most disgusting manner as she focused on healing herself. Serana joined us not long after, her left wing having grown back in the past few seconds, but her contorted face showed just how much pain she was in. Any ideas on how to slow him down, at least? I shoot a quick question to Valerica. She grunts, visibly forcing her voice to remain level. Even with the sun weakening him, the open air gives him even more room to maneuver. I frown, teared. Time slows down as I watch the surface of the sea bubbling, Harkon's fully healed form already ascending from the depths, and his furious eyes fixed on me. My mind starts racing with possible plans of action. Fucker was too fast for me to simply shoot him with the bow, and wearing him down could take anything between hours and days. I could always just delay him until the other archmages turn up, or in the worst-case scenario, I could summon Cry. Duke his ass pops, Scorch chirps excitedly. What do you mean? I fire back. Instead of getting a verbal response, he sends me a mental image and I grin. Of bloody course the sunbird would think of that. Time resumes its natural flow as Harkon bursts out of the water and speeds directly toward me. I feel him channel even more of his life force into his body as he handily slams Serana out of his way and outright ignores Valerica's lightning strike, simply firing a bolt of blood back at her and forcing her away. I share my sight with Scorch and engage maximum precognition as he blurs in front of me, each of his increasingly furious strikes being redirected by my perfectly timed deflections. Finally, he grows too furious and simply throws himself at me, Scorch being too slow to dodge as he positioned himself just right to catch us both. Which was the exact moment I was waiting for. Fame. Scorch is turned to mush of ethereal feathers by the flying vampire, but his slash of both sword and claw merely flies through me as I allow his inertia to carry him away and summon Auriel's bow once again. Harkon sneers as my form turns corporeal once again. Foolish mortal, Auriel was a fool to give you his bow. You cannot hit a tower, much less myself, he mocks. Okay. I deadpan and once again slam myself with telekinesis, twisting out of yet another lunge by the bloodthirsty maniac. The movement allows me to point the bow upwards, and allowing my blessing to guide me, I simply let the arrow fly. Harkon stops moving as he feels a sudden sense of danger and turns around just in time to see a flash of gold pointed directly at the sun. And then the sun pulses. For the briefest moment, all sunlight is imbued with the blessing of Auriel. Serana and Valerica look up in wonder at the fact they were not in pain. My heartbeat slows as I relax in the glorious embrace of its warmth once again, and Harkon, Harkon screams. His skin burns as the very sun glares directly at him. Soon his voice is gone as his vocal cords are boiled, the pained noise returning on and off as his regeneration attempted to save him from his end. There is no hesitation in his once-wife's heart as Valerica summons a spear of iron and turns it into pure silver, launching it straight into his heart and impaling him into the side of the castle, just where Serana was waiting. She hesitates for the briefest moment, but one quick look at us reminds her of what must be done as she closes her eyes and plunges her fangs into Harkon's neck, causing a gasp of genuine terror from the ancient man. As Serana pulls back, Harkon rasps, "Your own father. You brought this on yourself," his daughter mutters sadly. "You allowed the prophecy created by a fool to take the reins of your whole life and destroy your family. So that is why he called me a puppet." Harkon, for the first time in millennia, free from the madness of the blood coursing through his veins, sighs deeply. He looks up at the sun with a forlorn expression in his eyes. "Icy," he mutters, "what a fool I was," and then turns to ash. Serana lands next to me and Valerica a moment later, unwilling to speak as she was currently going through her father's feelings and processing his immense power. Still, I was petty enough to wait for the mother to start consoling her daughter so that I could spit on the ground in the direction of the fucker's ashes. Good riddance to bad rubbish. I curse and walk back to the pair of vampires. "What now?" Valerica asks as she holds the almost asleep Serana. "Now you make sure to be there for your daughter as she attempts to salvage your family's failure." I tell her bluntly and take a deep breath, my Thuum and illusion magic already flowing to amplify my voice. "To all those who would guard the brilliant dawn, rejoice, for we are victorious." I watch through my third eye as what little of the vampires still standing panic briefly before trying to surrender and immediately being cut down without the barest hint of mercy. A deafening cheer soon spreads through the castle as I can practically taste the righteous pride of the troops and their leaders. Ah, how I adore the sweet taste of victory. Chapter 272. The Ashes Settle. The sweet taste of victory lasted me only for about a minute longer before the irritating realities of warfare reasserted themselves as Rika barged into the ruined chapel and browbeat me into checking on every single legionary and Dawnguard member to make sure none of them were about to die, or worse yet, turn into vampires. As for my own forces, Gelibor and Nightshade were more than enough to ensure a lack of Molag Bal-rated STDs among our meager numbers, so I did not even bother looking at them. Neither of them were stupid enough to make that kind of mistake, and I would have been genuinely shocked if they managed to somehow fuck it up. Worst case scenario, I learn that my people are less competent than I thought, and I get some uncursed vampires in my forces. All of them have long since left the castle and were chilling on the jagged crown, unwilling to spend any longer in the place they went crawling through guts and bones. On that cheerful note, the feeding grounds were suddenly painted a nice charcoal black, which I am sure is completely unconnected to the gleeful-looking bunch of elves. Hours and well over 100 cases of sanguinar vampiris, purged out of people's systems. Later, I was finally able to plop down on one of the less filthy chairs in the repurposed throne room of the castle, the whole thing having been turned into something of a command center as our uninjured forces went about cleaning the whole castle out of anything worth taking with the gusto hitherto unseen in the Legion. Sure, Valerica did grumble a lot, but even she knew not to dispute Skyrim's sacred tradition of looting the shit out of anything you found in a den of monsters. Not even the gods would have saved her from the furious Nords, who lost over 300 of their comrades that day if she did. Besides, her lab has long since been looted by yours truly, so anything she may have felt was important was already back in her hands. As I finished with my short smoke break, I joined Torrig at the central table. Anyone not stuck in a looting frenzy, which funnily enough excluded Tolfdir and Phineas as the two were currently on a merry quest digging through the vaults of the castle, was standing or seated around the table. Torrig was discussing something with the Thanes, the Legion officers were debating the battle while looking mightily frustrated, and the Dawnguards were just standing there, looking completely and utterly lost. Tullius and Rika both looked worn out by the day's events. Their elite forces would no doubt be a massive pain to have replaced, as one does not simply train an elite veteran. I doubted, however, that that was the reason for their current dour mood. No, the duo of veteran officers were currently being struck with the realization of just how useless even their personal elites were against truly powerful magi, and were both brainstorming ideas on how to make sure their beloved legion is not wiped out by any random Thalmor mage with more creativity than a vegetable. Yes, somehow we managed to scare the legion more than the vampires who took out over a third of them in just a few hours. I was not apologizing. Savos and Shalazar were eagerly listening in while poorly pretending to talk about the castle's ward scheme and giggling to each other as Rika was proposing more outlandish counters to our styles of fighting. Leaving that amusing sight, I moved on to the king. Torrig and his thanes looked tired and wrung out. All of the thanes participated in the battle directly, and while Torrig was not permitted to the front lines, he still did his utmost to lead by example, so almost everyone had sported a wound or three. Yet despite that, all of them had an air of satisfied pride around them, as even Erica looked happy with the idea of no longer having to deal with constant vampire attacks. The glory of our victory no doubt helped as well. I was honestly disappointed that Harold wasn't able to come. The madman would have probably loved invading a castle of vampires with his warriors at his side, but unfortunately for the both of us, the Thane was currently stuck in his steading, dealing with the immigration of a bunch of defecting Forsworn. Much to his dismay, if Torrig's cheerful words were to be believed. Done with my 1 second of silent observation, I cleared my throat. Did anyone else get bitten while I wasn't looking? I asked cheerfully while hiding my annoyance, and as usual my voice takes command of the room, stopping any other conversation. Rika looks amused for a brief moment, but shakes her head. No, any vampire that was smart enough to survive was also smart enough to flee. She offers me a brief salute at that. Still, you have our thanks for saving so many. Pointedly not mentioning the dozen or so vampires currently hiding in a secret room, I let out a neutral hum, accepting the thanks, and looked to Torrig. So when are we leaving? The king's eyes brighten at the idea of getting as far as possible from the bloodied castle that was somehow sucking out even his enthusiasm. We let the men finish what they are doing and board the ships as quickly as possible. There were talks about turning the castle into an outpost, but no one wants to garrison a cursed island, so we will be leaving it alone. The island isn't cursed, though, I blurt immediately. Yeah, tell that to them. He amusedly points to a group of legionaries making whatever religious gestures they practiced as they pointedly avoided going anywhere near the feeding grounds. Fair enough. I roll my eyes at the obvious superstition, but then I turn serious and level a lightly annoyed glare at the young king. Then again, you are aware that we already had plans for the island's fate. Torrig winces slightly and raises his hands placatingly. Yes, yes. Some people were just a bit too enthusiastic about it and are not privy to the plan. He gives Erica a pointed look, but the Thane simply huffs in annoyance and looks away. This little shit. When it is my turn to give out annoyed looks, he doesn't even need to see me for a shiver of terror to go down his spine, at which point he vacates the table, soon followed by his totally not lover Bryling. Helm looks at their retreating backs with a judgmental stare, probably annoyed by his fellow Thanes not taking their duties seriously, but doesn't otherwise react. In any case, I forcefully resume the conversation. I am likely going to be busy for a few months, building up some forces for what is to come, so I would appreciate not being summoned for every little thing. Torrig nods, his expression serious. Of course, your current task is more important than any skirmish. There is some confusion among the Legion members and the remaining Thane, but none of them breach the topic. Speaking of little things, I speak up again while scratching my chin. I suspect Ulfric might act out after hearing of our victory here. His side has been losing the war from the beginning, and what with the constant rumors about his supporters, the faith in his cause has taken a big hit, so he might end up doing something drastic to retake a modicum of momentum. Tullius frowns at that implication. Winter has begun only recently. I doubt he would be able to commit to a grand assault before spring, even if his forces are almost exclusively Nordic and used to it. Which doesn't mean he can't act at all. I point at the general. Elite forces can still be used to damage something or other of importance, and you underestimate just how fanatical some of the Stormcloaks are. Just keep the troops ready for potential fuckery and we are golden. That tells me nothing. He grumbles barely audibly, mostly to himself. Very well, I will ensure the troops are combat ready if the time comes. He suddenly looks even more tired, and Ricker seems to have gotten a sudden idea. Something to do with a certain crown, I'd wager. I give him a smile that is just the perfect mix of cheeky and appreciative as to maximize his annoyance, while not outright insulting him, and clap my hands. That is all I needed to know. Isran, if you would walk with me. I wave for the Red Guard and leave without waiting. He seemed a bit out of it for a brief moment, my invitation no doubt having shaken him out of whatever worries were infesting his mind. He quickly catches up to me and asks, "What did you need?" Deciding not to needle him for once, I ask, "What are your plans now that your main goal is complete?" He slows down at that, causing me to do the same so as to not leave him behind. A troubled look mars his face as he considers the question for a full minute. He lets out a defeated sigh. "I do not know. There will always be a need for warriors to face the beasts prowling in the night, but none remain that would justify a response like the Dawn Guard." Hold that thought. I raise my hand, stopping the both of us as a bunch of loot-laden legionaries pass the hall in front of us. They pause briefly to salute us and leave just as quickly. Not hiding my amusement, I shake my head and keep walking like nothing happened. As all noise becomes distant, Isran resumes, "I thought of returning the Dawn Guard to our mercenary roots. At least in that case those who remained would be able to make a living. But I am reluctant." He grumbles, "Would we not be just another bunch of money-hungry companions if I did that?" You aren't wrong there, even if there is nothing wrong with being paid for honest work. I hum my agreement without turning, but you are wrong if you think there will be no evil to smite, as it were. It takes him a moment to realize my implication, but the moment he does, he tenses up, slipping almost comfortably back into his serious state. "Another threat?" he asks grimly. "Indeed, and I will need all the help I can get to deal with it." I explain lazily, as if discussing the weather. All of his earlier lethargy leaves him as newfound purpose reignites his being. "What is it?" Finally, I turn back with a wide grin, showing off my excitement and hiding my terror. "Have you ever heard of our destroyer and devourer Alduin the World Eater?" In the next instant, I am cursed with a noise so foreign it outright made me shiver, for I heard Isran laugh. Then I got to watch his utter terror as he realized I was not, in fact, fucking with him. After telling the poor man everything I believed he needed to know, I left Isran behind, looking more grim then, when he was certain he was going to have to face Harkon with only a bunch of angry farmers at his side. Indeed, I somehow managed to disturb him even more than Harkon potentially blotting out the sun, and that fact made me laugh my arse off internally. Good Scorch made his best impression of Palpatine while cackling like a loon. Good thing no one could hear him. Ahem. I mentally clear my throat. Thank you. I smile at the ensuing silence in my head, and wasn't that a thought I ever thought about having? And lacking further obstruction, I enter the so-called royal suite of the castle through its ruined doors, my eyes immediately landing on the two vampires who were discussing something while seated on Harkon's luxurious and completely unused bed. A bit morbid for my tastes, but then again they do eat people. "I see you finally woke up." I greet Serana and offer her mother a quick nod. "Yes, I am feeling much better now." The greatly empowered daughter of Cold Harbor speaks softly, but there is a new powerful quality to her voice, subtly vibrating a mental suggestion through the air. Likely noticing my immediate and instinctual frown, she winces. "Sorry about that. It is quite difficult to keep under control." At least we know how Harkon kept so many madmen under his thumb now. I quip after making sure my mental barriers were up. "Don't worry," I assure the almost panicked vampire. "An ability like this can definitely be controlled, and then you will just have another weapon in your arsenal for when you do need it." "Thanks." She smiles weakly, still a bit out of it, due to literally eating her father's experiences. Valerica adds nothing, and we all soon settle into a comfortable silence as I take a seat on a nearby dusty chair, the instant clean-up abilities of precise telekinesis coming in clutch once again. A good 10 minutes pass before I decide to speak again. "Considering your new position as Skyrim's vampire lord won't be an issue for at least a few years. What are your plans now that you are finally free? Both of them seemed to almost preen at that little fact. I could not even fathom the overwhelming feeling of relief firing in their minds now that there were no swords hanging above their heads, but it must have been utterly intoxicating if even Valerica managed to lose her composure so easily. The two of them share a look and a subtle nod before Serana turns back to me. "We will remain here for a while," she says with both cheer and melancholy. "This is our home, ruined as it is, and we want to see it repaired and free of Harkon's madness, once and for all. We also need to ensure no puppets of his remain in Garen's little group of sycophants," Valerica adds with obvious frustration. I tilt my head. "Decided on letting him live, have you?" "Against my advice," Valerica grits out. But she is stopped by her daughter placing an arm on her shoulder. "Against my mother's no doubt better judgment, I have decided to give them a chance. Garen always seemed to disagree with Harkon, and he is someone reliable. As long as you don't go on a world-ending quest, of course." "Imagine that," I quip dryly. Giving Valerica an amused look, I ask, "How much did you threaten him?" She huffs. "Such words are better not repeated in polite company." "Since when am I considered polite by your standards?" I snark, earning me a light glare. Serana clears her throat, drawing our attention. "As fun as it is listening to the two of you, you did ask me a question." "And so I did. Come then, grace us with your wisdom, my lady." I bow dramatically. The new lady of the castle rolls her eyes. "As I was saying before Mother went on her tangent, we plan on remaining in the castle for a good while. After we finish with the repairs, I will try attracting traders to settle here, at least seasonally. Which is no doubt going to lead to a settlement forming and you having a trading hub before long." I finish for her. "Exactly." She tries to copy my signature wise-ass smirk and fails utterly. "A respectable plan by all accounts." I nod, especially since you can afford to wait a literal eternity. Things are so much easier when one is not limited by mortality. Valerica cuts in smugly. "I find your excuses for the renowned lethargy of your kind to be rather short-sighted." I fire back without even looking at her. "It is so sad you will never get to experience it." She offers kindly, but I simply shrug it off. "Hey, I've got a couple of eras in me." "Couple eras is still not immortal," Valerica insists. "Your grasp on mathematics aside," I finally turn to the amused matriarch. "You are not getting out of teaching me anytime soon, and I've already set up a teleportation mark outside the castle." "Naturally," she forces a smile. "I am not so foolish as to attempt to go back on a deal with someone who can do what you have done." "Excellent." I smile back, my expression far more genuine than hers. "Oh, stop it, you two." Serana groans, blasting the both of us with a powerful mental suggestion. Both of us give her our driest possible looks, and for a moment she stills completely, before bursting into a fit of giggles at seeing us do so in perfect sync. The conversation devolves into more mundane things after that. Their plans on how they would make the castle look, invitations for visits between our factions, how they would interact with the kingdom itself, etc., etc. It was only an hour later that I left the room, a feeling of satisfaction in my chest, even if I was saddened at losing the company of the mother and daughter duo, however temporarily. "Hey," I hear Serana call out as I am about to leave the hallway. I turn around with a raised eyebrow. "Yes?" Suddenly, and without being able to react, I find myself enveloped in a hug, an experience far more uncomfortable for her than it was to me if her twitchiness was anything to go by, and I hear her mumble, "Thanks for everything." Gently patting her on the back, I smile. "Anytime, Serana, anytime." Sanguinare Vampiris is vampire disease. Chapter 273, Interlude I, The Quest for Ethereum. General POV, a few moons before Harkon's demise. A small group comprised of 7 elves and 1 human can be seen moving down a narrow path to the south of Markarth's hold. 5 of them were simple guards, armed with halberds and armored in the usual dark hue preferred by their lord. All of them were relaxed and chatting amongst each other, while one held the reins of the singular horse, drawing a small cart behind it. The scene on the cart was less relaxed. One corner was occupied by a short and slightly feral-looking Fulmer, playing with a throwing knife while mumbling something to himself, while in the other sat a Nord woman, currently looking over a messily arranged map. The leader of the group, a young pale-haired Dunmer woman, sat at the cart's front with a deep frown on her face. Idrasa Moabine tisked in irritation as Katria once more rearranged the map and opened yet another book, its pages scrawled over with notes and references. "I still can't believe you lied to his face and got out alive." Idrasa addresses the Nord woman, startling her out of her research. "To think you promised so much only to end up with mere hints." "Well, I did say it was going to be a search," Katria retorts hotly, annoyed by the distraction. "Just because I don't know the exact location of everything we might need doesn't mean I am in the wrong. Besides, I have seen the resonator beacon." She turns almost frantic as she continues justifying herself. "It had a slot meant to hold some kind of key, and I am sure we will be able to find it in Arkenthams." "Well, you obviously know something at least." Idrasa scoffs. "You would not have survived otherwise." Katria gives her an odd look. "I highly doubt someone of your lord's renown would have killed me over a single lie. Kicked me out, yeah, sure, but he did not strike me as the cruel kind." "Poor innocent fool," Idrasa laments her temporary colleague's naivety, but quickly redirects her thoughts towards something more productive. "I knew we were going to need to explore. I am just disappointed with how shallow your preparations are. For all we know, this could very well be a massive waste of our time." "I see what is going on here," Katria hums knowingly. "You just don't like leaving your luxuries, do you?" The Dunmer pointedly looks straight ahead. "And what is so wrong with that?" "Oh, nothing at all." The Nord coos at her as if she were a child. Before she can show the irritating human her place, Eldor clears his throat. "Is there a point to all this bickering? The Lord is a powerful seer, and if she sent us here, he naturally believed we would find something of worth at least." "See, even the goblin agrees." Katria smirks triumphantly, causing some of the soldiers to let out quiet chuckles. "Now look here, you little shy—" "Ahem," Idrasa interrupts. "We are here." The bickering bunch raise their gazes and are met with the usual monolithic architecture of the missing deep elves. Before any of them can so much as blink, Katria is already armed and armored, her enchanted bow in hand and a bunch of leather-bound books loaded on her back. Idrasa and Eldor share a look of pure suffering, and the Falmer sighs. "This is going to be a thing, isn't it?" Cursed with long experience in such matters, the Dunmer just accepts her fate and signals for the soldiers to stock up. Hopefully the idiot human wouldn't get herself killed too quickly. They found Katria just inside the first passage, fiddling with the lock of the large bronze gate, hiding the entrance into the true facility. Thankfully, the well over a dozen traps had been triggered so many times before that all the bolt launchers in the walls failed to skewer her. Instead of bothering with scolding the human, Idrasa simply walked up to her, gave the gate one quick look, and proceeded to tap certain sections of the bronze metal. The contact sent out a faint ringing sound through the place, and then, as if it were never locked in the first place, the gate simply opened. Suddenly out of her fugue, Katria gave her guide a look of genuine surprise. "What?" "I was stuck with this task for a reason." Idrasa explains smugly. "Now let us find the fabled Ethereum that was for whatever inane reason stuck in this forgotten place." "Well, it all had to do with a war between the Dwemerholds." Katria begins only to be interrupted by the Dunmer. Yes. You wrote a whole book about it already. I may not like you, but I am not stupid enough not to get informed about what I am doing." Stuck between being flattered and insulted, Katria had to run after the group as they left her behind almost a full minute ago. She really needed to get her head out of the clouds, didn't she? "Yup, that sure looks like a ruin." An amused voice echoes through the rocky cave, covering a massive portion of the once great city. "Your powers of observation are noted, Eldor." Idrasa almost growls. The sleazy Falmer bows. "Why, thank you, my lady. I exist to impress." The sound of huffing draws them from their conversation as Katria catches up and is greeted with the same sight as they. "Well, that doesn't look good." "You don't say," Idrasa snips dryly. "But I am sure we will be able to find what we are looking for," Katira exclaims excitedly. "We just need to give the surface level a once-over, and we will no doubt find an intact passage." The Nord woman starts looking around the place without even waiting for them. surprisingly enough, finding a couple of passages and leading the group into a vast opening, which led to an odd-looking Dwemer construct in the distance. Something tells me that is exactly what we are looking for. The Nord sats with complete certainty after a full 3 seconds of looking. Delusions are not a valid source of actionable information. The already emotionally exhausted Yggdrasil snarks. "Oh, come off it, you stick in the mud." Katria waves her off with her ever-increasing excitement. "We just need to reach that spot, and the proof will be ours." The Dunmer prepares to make a passage from the nearby stone, but goes completely ignored by the Nord, who was already looking at everything with the speed of a hamster on cocaine. Minutes later, Katria gives the group a slightly embarrassed look. Do you have any ideas?" Without a word, and while staring the woman straight in the eyes, Yggdrasil walks up to the ledge and keeps walking as a sturdy stone bridge forms under her feet. Katria pointedly shuts up after that. With cautious steps, the group approaches the structure from the side, all of them being very careful about loose floor tiles or pressure plates. Those are minor resonators. Katria takes only a moment to recognize the mechanisms stuck in the wall. We need only hit them with something and they will activate the doorway. By the time she finished speaking, she had already drawn her bow and aimed it at one of the resonators. But thankfully for the whole group, Eldor and 2 of the soldiers had long since learned to take care around her and immediately dogpiled her without letting her draw her bow. One immensely infuriated rant by Yggdrasil and righteously scolded Nord later. The group had retreated behind cover, which was then thoroughly fortified by the resident alteration mage to more resemble a bunker than an actual alcove in the rock wall. Only once she was completely sure they would be safe from whatever happened, did Yggdrasil summon her own animonculous sphere and had it shoot at the resonators. It took some doing, a couple of sudden earthquakes and dozens of Dwemer spiders getting spewed out of the nearby walls and then promptly disassembled before the gates opened up and all traps were deactivated once they finally got the combination right. Finally, having gotten it into her head that running ahead like an idiot was a bad idea, Katria kept her pace with the group as they entered the presumed vault. And sitting there, practically in the open, was a small fragment of blue crystalline metal, passively radiating more power than most mages. Surrounding it was a veritable mountain of bronze slabs, covered to the brim in Dwemer writing. "Is that?" Yggdrasil asks with genuine surprise. "It must be." Katria, already having forgotten her previous lessons, much to the chagrin of everyone but her, runs up to the fragment and starts touching it, thankfully not dying in the process. She is soon joined by her Dunmer compatriot, who, having a much greater sense of self-preservation, uses her magic to scan the thing and comes to much the same conclusion. It is an alloy that radiates power and that has not been seen in millennia. If it isn't Ethereum, then we just found something just as valuable. She concludes. "And look at these tablets." Katria draws her attention. "Look, this one looks like a map and a record." The Nord starts stacking up her books and writing equipment as she speaks. "I will need some time to translate it all, but the wait will be worth it." As she spoke, she did not even notice Yggdrasil grabbing the tablet from her hands and bringing it up to read. She tried mumbling the words out, but her tongue got twisted and she started choking on her own words a mere minute in. She then wisely decided to just read in silence, completely ignoring the baffled Nord in the process. "Huh." Eldor coughed, chortled, hoped their vile spawn choked on their own words like that when they taught them to speak. Fucking deep cunts would deserve it too. Temporarily distracted from her staring, Katira gives the snow elf an odd look. "You speak as if you hate them?" Eldor gives her his most deadpan look. "Woman, what am I?" "A falm. Oh." Katria once again finds herself shutting up out of sheer embarrassment. At least they may find the locations of the other fragments here, right? A month later, the entire group, covered in some kind of green goop, ran out of a Dwemer lift and onto an open platform, even the Dunmer welcoming the frigid mountain air of Skyrim as they crawled out of the putrid curse that was the underground remnant they were just forced to crawl through. "That was the most disgusting damned thing I've ever—" Yggdrasil trails off as she realizes just how filthy she is and promptly summons a bunch of water with her magic, completely covering her, Katria, and the guards in it without a care. "Oh gods, the smell is still there." One of the younger soldiers nearly weeps. A noise draws everyone's attention to a particularly filthy-looking Eldor dragging a bunch of Dwemer metal trinkets behind him in a massive bag. He was so covered in the filthy stuff that he outright looked like a goblin now. "What?" the Falmer asks, as if his current state was completely natural. "How can you—" One of the guards trails off while pointing at him. "Eh?" The goblin-looking creature shrugs. "Crawl through one pile of goop, you've crawled through all of them." He grins. "At least I got a nice payday about it this time." His grin is promptly wiped from his face as Yggdrasil slams a burst of water into him with the force of a power washer. An hour of rest later, they find the next shard sitting in the open and immediately pack it up. And then Yggdrasil notices something in the distance. There was a side passage, the entire god's damned time. Yet another moon hence. "Not it!" Katria blurts, followed by all of the guards chorusing after her. Before the distracted Falmer can catch on, Yggdrasil forces herself to grit out, "Not it." "What?" Eldor turns from his looting spree and gives everyone a confused look. "Congratulations, Eldor." Katria clapped her hands. "You just got volunteered to unclog the gears stuck beneath the water. And you know where you can voluntarily stick it, you—" "Eldor." Yggdrasil cuts him off with a threatening smile. "Get in the water, or I will confiscate your loot for research purposes." He shivers. "You wouldn't." "You did endanger the group multiple times due to your constant pillaging." Her smile widens, the expedition having long since brought out a bit of a sadistic streak in the young Dunmer. "I wouldn't even be lying to Lord Raven if I said that." "Gah!" The Falmer flinches. Fine, I will get in the damn pool." A few minutes later, the sound of turning gears fills the room and the water level lowers enough for the gate that barred their path to be opened. And then the gate opened on its own, and a centurion barged out from within. As the sounds of gears were replaced with those of battle, Eldor found himself suddenly enjoying the now shallow pool of water. Truly, one should enjoy the little things in life. He did not enjoy it much after a stray lightning bolt struck the water, though. Weeks later, the ragged group of adventurers approached yet another Dwemer ruin, all decorum and pomp long since forgotten as they were forced to avoid Stormcloak patrols for days at a time. Even Yggdrasil failed to look prim and proper, and she had access to alteration magic. They approached the gates of Munzulft, many of their weapons and armor replaced by scavenged Dwemer metal, as even with the many enchantments they were blessed with, the constant fighting had overburdened their lord's gifts, and now the lot of them looked more like mercenaries or bandits than proper soldiers. Before Yggdrasil could unlock the gate, she felt Eldor tugging at her sleeve and turned to see him pointing at a small shed-like structure nearby. "I think we should check that one out first. Just because you got an admittedly good price for your loot doesn't mean we are going to waste any more time scrounging through any more holes than necessary." Yggdrasil shakes him off. Eldor looks just about ready to accept her words when Katria speaks up. "Maybe we should check it out. It may be some sort of storage building." It does not take them long to explore the small building, and once they managed to unlock one of the small doorways within, they came upon a wondrous sight. The last fragment sat there, beckoning them like sweet salvation at the end of a torturous pilgrimage. "I could kiss the both of you right now." Yggdrasil almost cries now that her task was technically completed. "We do still need to go to the main resonator," Katria pipes in. "No." The Dunmer rejects her with finality. "No?" Eldor looks surprised. "We are going to Winterhold." Yggdrasil nods to herself for her impeccable logic. Lord Dagoth no doubt wants to see the forge himself, and us wasting the metal on accident sounds like a good way to get our asses fried. "You just want your bed back, don't you?" Katria teases immediately. "Yes, damn it. By Azura, I want to sleep in an actual bed. Now get moving, you damn Noir." Yggdrasil practically screams and starts pushing the chuckling Nord out of the storage room. She could not even bother being surprised once she learned about everything that happened during her absence. Chapter 274, Interlude 2, Sparks of a Brighter Future. As winter approached, an almost permanent fog once more settled onto the narrow and dreary streets of Windhelm's Grey Quarter, plummeting the mood of the residents even further and then shooting it in the head. This was not helped by the fact that if a day was warm, the ice in the upper city would melt, sending water and sometimes waste flowing down into the lower city, and with the lack of maintenance imposed by the paranoid hatred of a vast number of the local Nords, the place sometimes ended up stinking worse than Malakath's home. And yet the people forced to live in this place, if it could even be called such, could do nothing but wait and pray to the good Daedra for salvation, for any sign of dissent was met with extreme prejudice by the self-proclaimed king of Skyrim. A small Dunmer child, clad in an oversized and likely stolen robes which hung over her actual clothes, slunk down the mostly empty streets, the residents long since having learned to not show themselves during nighttime as to avoid the overly eager guards sometimes patrolling the place. Even if some patrols tended to disappear when they took things too far, causing all kinds of rumors about the shadowy protectors of the people and something about a three-eyed beetle seeing all. Irene was a relatively normal sight in the quarter, not that she was seen often, but the number of children forced to steal to get by was unfortunately high. Even with the downright suspicious amount of help the adults were able to provide them from time to time. And the only part of her that made her different from the others was her pair of bright purple eyes and her uncanny ability to sense danger. This had earned her something of a reputation as overly cautious, but she had learned years ago that it wasn't paranoia if they were actually out to get you. Following behind the kind Mer who offered help without question into the depths of the quarter had been an enlightening experience for her, widening her perception of the world and giving her perspective on what really mattered. Power. It was always about power. If they were powerful enough to hit back, then the Nords would not be able to step on them as they liked, and the true power she was shown on that day was magic, which then quickly turned into an obsession. Each day she was not forced to work for survival, she spent seeking ways to strengthen herself and unlock the powers of magic. At first, she failed at finding a teacher, her intuition screaming at her not to attempt doing anything by herself, and with great reluctance she listened to it. Instead, she spent her evenings talking to the adults and asking for tips about anything that she could use. The adults eagerly told her tales and showed her tricks, and she absorbed it all like a sponge, learning how to sneak around and throw knives with enough precision for her lack of strength to not matter. Slowly her reputation turned from being overly cautious to being a natural at anything she put her mind to. Numerous times she snuck into the upper city and came back with enough supplies for more than she needed, earning her both praise and envy from her fellow children and a modicum of respect from the adults. And then one day she found herself floundering. She attempted to once again sneak into the upper city, but whoever the old man guarding the passage was, noticed her immediately, inadvertently drawing the attention of his hateful comrade. She almost ended up getting beaten up that day. She held no doubts she would have been thrown back into the quarter with broken bones. And she would have if not for a Nord Stormcloak recruit of all people defending her and even giving her food. She ran away then, lost and confused as to what to think. Her perception was always that the Nords hated them universally, but the actions of that young man shattered it completely and utterly. She concluded then that neither helped her because she was Dunmer, they helped her because she needed help. Utterly ridiculous, she thought at first, but the more she thought about it, the more she liked the idea of people not being forced to behave a certain way, just because of their heritage. This newfound desire to know more led her to the only place in the quarter that outsiders still visited with peaceful intentions, the new Gnesis Corner Club. She was welcomed with open arms and started spending her time talking with anyone who would deign to speak to her. She spoke with Argonian dock workers, those who were canny enough to sneak through the gates at least, and even an aged Nord going by Brun Wolf Freewinter, a retired soldier who openly spoke of his dreams of peaceful coexistence between their peoples, much to the wrath of his fellow Nords. Yet they did nothing, simply because the man was able to crush their heads with his bare hands. Once again she found her perspective expanding, learning about the outside world which until then had been nothing but a distant myth to her, and more importantly to her, reaffirming her understanding that power was truly the start of everything. And then she met the person who truly changed her life. She went by Beetle and never went anywhere without a veil covering her face. The woman was often referred to as a massive cocktease by the tavern goers, whatever that meant. At first, Beetle seemed amused by Irene's attempts to get her to teach her anything and everything. She outright giggled at how cute the child looked when she told her she knew basic fire and illusion magic. She regretted that when Irene started pestering her almost every single day, begging, bribing, and threatening anything in the book for just a single chance of learning under her. There was only so much puppy dog eyes one could take, and thus Beetle found herself with something of an apprentice, even if she knew damn well that she was nowhere near qualified to be anything beyond an apprentice herself. After she accepted, though, Beetle decided to do nothing by half measures, ensuring that the girl was suddenly offered a job at the corner club so as to keep an eye on her at all times, and even telling the other guildsmen to keep an eye on her, much to Lord Davos's amusement. This level of attention proved rather fruitful when the child managed to summon a flame after only a day of preparatory learning. Irene's expression when she did so was a memory every single patron of the club burned into their minds. Things even turned peaceful for a time. The patrols were not even bothering with spending more time in the quarter than absolutely necessary, and a silent agreement was evident that if the Dunmer did not rebel, the king would just leave them to their own devices and even provide some food from time to time. That all changed when rumors of a massive defeat suffered by the Stormcloaks reached the hold and thus the quarter. Apparently, the self-proclaimed king blamed some Dunmer from Winterhold for handling his elite forces pretty much on his own, and then the retaliations started. The patrols increased, and the guards took every excuse to extract justice on the residents of the quarter. They rarely ended up killing anyone, as those who did tended to disappear after the first few days, but tensions were rising constantly, and there was something of a silent war between the mysterious three-eyed beetle and the Jarl, leading to the further destitution of many Dunmer and the death of dozens of Stormcloaks. She tried questioning the adults about it, but none were willing to speak about it. She had suspicions about Beetle being the mysterious defender, but when she outright asked, the woman actually laughed at her and told her not to worry her pretty little head about it. She was outright forbidden from being present during certain times in the dead of night. And so, since no one was willing to tell her, she decided to do things her way once again. When her shift was over, she snuck into a hidden alcove in the corner club and used her minor illusion magic to reduce her presence and hide. She waited for hours as day turned to night, and the time came for whatever the adults did. A group of Dunmer entered the club, going completely ignored by the other patrons, even if a number of them wore the best light armor she had ever laid her eyes on. She also felt that the odd piece of purple cloth hanging from their belts was important for some reason. They took their seats in one of the corners, the crowd seemingly growing louder as if by silent command, and they began talking to each other quietly. Thankfully, the alcove she was hidden in was close enough for her to make out what they were talking about. She pressed herself against the board as much as she could without making them squeak and started listening. "So what happened, Hlalu?" Rendar asked the seated Dunmer with a worried frown. Balin Hlalu, a distant member of the defunct Great House, took a long gulp of his drink and slammed it against the table, earning a light glare from the owner. "Sorry about that." He winces as the aftertaste hits him. "Bloody Stormcloaks just marched up to my farm and demanded I leave. Said they were confiscating it for suspicions of espionage, and just pushed me out into the dirt without even bothering to wait." He stops himself from slamming the table again. That bitch Adsila did not even bother speaking up when they did it, and just accepted the ownership of the farm with a smile. "That is," Rendar trails off with genuine disappointment in his voice. "I worked for years to earn these people's respect, you know." Hlalu's shoulders sag in defeat, and just like that, all of it is gone because they blame all of us for being beaten by a Dunmer on the other side of the province. Beetle, who had appeared without anyone even noticing, giggles at that. "Ah yes, the Lord can be rather attention-grabbing when he wants to." Hlalu gives her a look of bafflement and a small bit of anger. "You are telling me that this mysterious Lord Dagoth you serve is the reason I got my farm taken?" Lord Dagoth? Irene's mind whirled at those words. She had heard enough stories about that house from the numerous drunkards, but she focused on what truly mattered here, and that was the fact that the three-eyed beetle was far more powerful than she originally thought. "Peace, Balin." Rendar pats his shoulder. "Your farm was taken because Ulfric is a bigot. He just used his defeat as an excuse." Yeah. Hlalu sighs. "I am sorry. I am just not. He shakes his head and turns silent. Rendar leaves him to his grieving and turns to the equally distraught fisherwoman. What about your end of things, Imren? It is terrible. She weeps while grabbing fistfuls of her hair. They won't even let us into our boats anymore. They are killing us, Amberis. Slowly, but they are doing it. You must believe me. I do, Imren. Calm yourself, please. Rendar tells her calmly, leading to her just resuming her quiet sobbing. A couple more of the attacked Dunmer air out their grievances, but none are quite as bad as the first two. Still, they are given the time to speak, and suggestions are shared over drinks for a while. Close to an hour later, the owner of the corner club and unofficial major of the quarter shares a look with Beetle, to which she nods after a full minute. He turns back to the duo. New positions have been opened up outside the city. I want you to gather everyone who won't be too missed and bring them to the pit. So we are just to leave? Hlalu asks, a bit offended, but mostly just done with life. Yes, Beetle confirms mercilessly. Bring as many as you can, and as many children as well. Lord Dagoth has managed to acquire a vast tract of land and is willing to offer employment to any who are willing to swear allegiance. Of course it comes with strings attached. Hlalu grouses, mostly for the sake of complaining he wasn't an idiot. Rendar simply shrugs at that. He is completely willing to send us as much help as can be smuggled, but he has no reason to give us anything for free in the first place. Fine. The farmer accepts his fate all too quickly. I will be there with whoever wants to come. But I am warning you, Rendar, this will draw attention. Almost as if summoned by his words, the doors of the corner club are slammed open as a group of armored Nords walk in as if they owned the place. This was a common occurrence, however, so Rendar simply welcomed with a smile and started dancing around them with words. Irene did not wait any longer and left as soon as she got the chance. And that is how she found herself sneaking through the foggy streets late at night, her thoughts awhirl with the information she had gained. This Lord Dagoth was apparently offering a brighter future, and more importantly, a way out into the outside world, and her teacher was in his service too. She did not need to think long before she decided to find where this pit was located. Yet for all her efforts, she failed completely and utterly. Finding herself on one of the main roads, and as if her disappointment was not enough, she felt her instincts flaring up as she moved to the side, just in time to avoid a shove from the guards returning from the corner club. The one who tried to shove her whirled on her for the sheer audacity of dodging him and stilled as he looked at her face. She also managed to get a look in turn and stilled as she realized something. The guard before her was the same one who got his teeth slapped out of him for attacking her months earlier. She did not even wait for the cunt to threaten her and was already running away. As fast as her little legs could take her, she managed to make it down 3 alleyways before she found herself cornered and out of breath. Her meandering and knowledge of the quarter's layout meant she managed to lose a good half of the Nords, but even one was more than enough to threaten her. The toothless fuck sneered at her as she backed up against a rotten crate, his eyes glinting with malice. Well, well, well. Look what we have here, lads. Irene was too terrified to think as the other 2 Nords joined their friend in his mockery, so she fell back to her core belief. Drawing as much of her meager power as she could, she pointed her hand at the suddenly tense Nord and loosed a gout of flame right at his face, causing him to scream and run into a nearby wall in an attempt to escape the pain. She did not even manage to turn to the other guards before one of them drew a short axe and struck her right in the chest. Pain assaulted her senses as she fell back, her fate as certain as the glee she felt for fighting back at least once in her life. The last thing she saw was the Nords falling down dead, as crossbow bolts slammed into them, and the familiar veiled visage of Beetle leaning over her with a glass bottle in her hand. Irene found herself thoroughly surprised when she woke up an undetermined amount of time later. The first thing she noticed was a complete lack of pain in her chest. The second was the clear, chilly air coming in from a nearby window while a light fire burned nearby. She forced her eyes open, only to find herself lying in a comfortable bed in a small room built from white stone. Her eyes widened as a sudden panic assaulted her, and she immediately asked herself if she was in the afterlife. Moments later she realized that that would have been ridiculous. One did not get tired in the afterlife after all, and she felt half dead at the moment. Not willing to keep herself ignorant, she grabbed a pile of clean clothes folded nearby and quickly dressed, finding the clothes to be far more comfortable than anything she ever wore. She smiled and stepped out of the room. A wall of noise assaulted her immediately as she did so, finding herself in a wide courtyard made of the same white stone as the small house she just left. She blinked as she realized the place was practically filled with similarly sized houses, but before she could observe any longer, she noticed someone looking at her. A tall Mer wearing dark armor with his face hidden by a carved mask, bearing the visage of Saint Nerevar, was pointing at her. The moment she gave him her attention, he pointed toward an exit that led toward a nearby cliff face. Not prepared to risk the wrath of her new hosts, she followed the implied order and soon found herself looking over some kind of canyon leading into a vast valley with multiple walls and fortifications under construction going on at the same time. Numerous Dunmer were milling about, joined by some very pale-looking elves she could not identify. With each moment, this place grew more mysterious, and Irene did not know whether she should be excited or terrified. Once again, her attention was drawn to a nearby figure. Their eyes met as soon as she thought about it, and she realized she recognized the Mer standing in front of her. Well now, I did think you would go far, but even I did not expect to hear of such a young mage outright killing a guard from my agents. The same Dunmer who inspired her years ago smiled down at her. Welcome to your new home, kid. If you would have it, that is. 1,000 emotions assaulted her when she heard that, so instead of embarrassing herself, she simply remained silent and nodded. Maybe, just maybe, the days of squalor were finally at an end. Chapter 275, Chapter 1. The Unbinding. The first thing she felt was the sound of a cart moving down an uneven road, the hooves of the horse pulling it following soon after. The next was the smell, the sweet smell of mountain spring, the smell of home. A large part of her almost leapt for joy. Realizing that she was awake, her eyes snapped open, rushing to absorb the sight before she was otherwise distracted. But, as always, the world had other ideas, as she swiftly realized she had gone to sleep in her armor, and her neck was now incredibly sore from leaning onto the enchanted steel plate. Her sudden groan of discomfort must have drawn some attention, for it took only a moment for a male voice to address her from her side. "Hey you are finally awake." A brown-haired Nord of a stocky build, wearing light Legion armor adapted to Skyrim's climate, greeted her with a smile as he waved his hand in front of her face. She made a sound that vaguely resembled "yesh." The young man chuckled in amusement. "You were lucky your companion had proper documentation when you were found camping at the border. We had just caught a large rebel raiding party and found you nearby." He pauses and looks away with a wince, would not have liked what happened otherwise. Her eyes snapped open fully as she shifted into a more comfortable position. How by all the gods did I sleep through all that? Before the soldier can answer, the amused laughter of her fellow adventurer draws her attention. "Come now, you know it takes a giant swinging its club to wake you." The Altmer shakes his head at the memory invoked by his words. A distant noise draws her attention. "Who is that?" she asks a moment later while pointing at the cart behind them, where a young Nord of noble grooming was attempting to rouse his fellow prisoners into action. His words sounded more like rehearsed preaching than anything else, so they didn't have much effect. The heavily armed guards probably did not help him in making his point either. The Altmer shrugs lackadaisically. "Some naive kid, probably. Damn idiot is practically asking them to commit suicide by annoyed legionaries." "Ah, one of those." She nodded, a slight feeling of disdain welling up within her unbidden. "Let us hope they are smart enough not to listen." Her friend hums and returns to reading a ballad of some sort, one of the many he took from their temporary home in Cyrodiil. Taking the hint, she leaves her friend to his musing and turns back to the soldier. "Where are we?" "On the road to Helgen," he answered after only a brief hesitation. "The prisoners need to be transferred to the dungeons, and your other friend said you needed to refill supplies." "I see." She trailed off momentarily, creating a mental picture of their position like she was taught. "That is probably wise," she concluded. The mention of her other companion caused her mixed feelings. On the one side, she was a highly trained soldier, assigned solely to ensure her protection, and was almost fanatically loyal from the moment she was informed of her true name. One the other, the skillfully hidden devotion behind those cold eyes was growing more unnerving by the day. She once more cursed the myrrh that thrust her toward her destiny without one moment to ask if she even wanted it. She did, of course, but it was the principle of the matter. "I am sorry?" She looked up and apologized to the amused soldier for ignoring him. "Don't sweat it. I hear your journey has been quite long." The legionary waves the whole thing off. "I wanted to inform you that we are— Attention, you maggots!" A loud call makes all the legionaries surrounding the column of carts straighten up. Even the drivers seem to stand at attention from their seats. An Orsima wearing personalized heavy imperial armor walks by their cart as he speaks. "Helgen is just over that hill, and I've just been informed that we will be visited by the general himself. I want the formation in perfect order, not a hair out of place. Is that understood?" A mostly affirmative murmuring greets him in response. "I said," the orc bellows, "is that understood?" "Yes, Quaestor," the legionaries chorus, drowning out the insults being thrown at their officer by the furious rebels. A silent moment passes before the amused voice of her friend is heard once more. "Well now, he has certainly changed." "You recognize him, Marco?" she asks in surprise. "You don't?" He raises an eyebrow. "That is Zarok, late of the Sprawl Freeman." "Indeed." A clear female voice startles everyone on the cart as a lightly armored Imperial practically materializes in the sat opposite her. The Kester has proven his ability both in battle and as a commander multiple times since he enlisted. The High King himself honored him with a rather quick promotion after his actions at the Battle of Helgen Pass. The agent's voice flows with perfect neutrality, not betraying a single emotion as she spoke as if she was discussing the weather. "What, Junes, did you just happen to check on his files before we accidentally ran into his unit?" Marco snarks amusedly. Junes, or Junia, momentarily failed to suppress the twitch of her eye at the prodding. It lasted only for the briefest moment, but Marco still took it as a win and smirked triumphantly. Accepting that she would have to deal with the smug elf for a while, Junia simply answered the question. "I have read up on every decanus and above stationed in the south of Skyrim before we crossed the border." "I did not see you carry a library with you," Marco points out. Junia merely smiled at that. "We have our ways." Before the two could start squabbling any further, she spoke. "Where have you been, Junia?" The Penitus Oculatus agent inclined her head. "Just scouting the cohort and ensuring we were not under any threat, my lady." "Yeah, you know, you could actually try and be subtle about this." Marco deadpans. Surprisingly, it is the legionary who answers him. "We know not to meddle with things so far above our pay grade." "Aye, lad." The cart driver snorts. "Selectively deaf, the lot of us are." A brief silence descends upon the cart, and it takes her only a moment to realize her rudeness. She looks at the soldier. "Apologies for my rudeness. I spoke to you without even introducing myself." He chuckles and raises a hand to forestall her, earning himself a quick frown from Junior in the process. "It is fine, you just woke up. Name's Hadvar." "My thanks for your patience, Hadvar." She smiles. "Minthara is my name." "Just Minthara?" Hadvar asks with a fair bit of growing amusement. For a moment she finds herself confused at the reaction, only to be broken out of it by Marco laughing his arse off. "Oh, come on, you are a bloody dragon slayer." He shakes her head. "There is not a Nord worth his mead that does not know your name." Minthara, suddenly taken aback by this, could only react one way, even with all the training she received back in Cyrodiil. She lowered her head and attempted to disappear in her corner of the cart, failing miserably. Warm laughter erupts across the cart, even Junior joining in briefly. But it lasts only briefly, for mere moments later the driver spoke. "We are here." Their approach was silent as the fortified town came into view, looking completely different from its state when they first left Skyrim. The basic stone wall and crumbling towers were replaced with what looked to be a completely new layer of greater quality stone surrounding it all. The walls were thicker, the towers sturdier, and she could even spy scorpions mounted atop them. A vast camp of the Imperial Legion surrounded the city from the west, incidentally also the direction from which they were approaching. So she got the perfect view of well over 1,000 hardened warriors forming up within seconds, leaving their pastimes and tents with the efficiency of a well-oiled automaton. Soon they were passing through the gates, catching just out of the corner of their eyes the sight of General Tullius furiously yelling at a frowning Thalmor-robed woman who was quoting some kind of jurisdiction she supposedly held over the prisoners. "Think you can take her out if she starts being a problem?" Minthara quietly asks Junior after she made sure no one else could hear her. The agent gives her an amused look. A good line of thought, but no. She sighs dramatically. "I am unable to kill the Altmer ambassador at this time." Realizing her mistake at not recognizing the Altmer, Minthara winces. "Oh." "Quite." Junior smiles. She was not assigned to her as a mere bodyguard, but as a part-time trainer in the matters of intrigue as well, and to her growing frustration, the agent took her job very seriously. They remained silent all the way until the carts were parked in the town's center, the officer with the list of prisoners not even looking up from her ledger and pointing to her right. "The general wishes to see you. Move along." Hadvars offered a quick farewell before he fell in next to the centurion and took over the list, questioning the prisoners about their origins and names, almost getting into a fight with a blonde man who was supposedly from the same village as him. Fucking Ulfric. The thoughts came to Minthara unbidden, not that she disagreed. Her attention was drawn back to the front as Junior offered the man in front of her a crisp salute. "General," she greeted, genuinely respectful to the man. "Operative." Tullius nodded and turned to her, Dragonbane, and added another quick greeting, "Viamo's kid." "Nephew, actually," Marco smirked, minorly irritating the Imperial man. The general, ignoring the Altmer's prodding, looked to Junior. "We have been warned of your potential coming. What assistance do you need?" Before Junior could answer, shouting made them all look to the prisoners, the same young noble from the cart, giving his last attempt at rousing his defeated comrades, and probably the townsfolk. "See this. They would execute us all so that we may not spread the truth of their corruption. For all their justice and fairness, they do not even offer a trial." The general cleared his throat, his commanding presence stopping even the rebel in his tracks. "Thank you." Tullius offered mildly as everyone quieted down and spoke in a tone with which one might address a toddler. "Now, child." The noble winces at the term. "Why exactly do you think you are about to be executed?" A bit confused, the young man points at the headman's block in the center of the square. "It's why you brought us here, no?" "Every town has a headsman's block." Tullius deadpans, completely unamused. The Nord sputters, his face growing red. "What?" he finally asks. Tullius takes a fortifying breath and slowly asks, "Did you and your unit commit any rape, pillaging, or any other punishable war crime that we failed to discover?" He reels back as if struck. "What? Of course we didn't. Which is why you get to languish in the dungeons instead of being beheaded," Tullius explains patiently. Seemingly lost as to what to say to the general, the young man looks around and notices her. You are Dragonbane, are you not?" Hiding her embarrassment to much greater effect this time, as it was overwhelmed by her annoyance at being singled out. Minthara raises an eyebrow. "Yes? Why do you stand beside these traitors then?" He points a finger at the general, who was by now palming his face and attempting to hold back a migraine. "You are a true Nord hero. How can you betray your people like that?" Rolling her eyes at the pitiful attempt, she pulls back her crimson hair, showing off her slightly pointed ears. "I will have to disappoint you then." She pointedly ignored the newly arrived ambassador, muttering, "Mongrel filth," with far more vitriol than she would assign to even the most arduous of Talos worshippers. The Stormcloak pauses briefly before seemingly coming to the most obvious conclusion he could. Even with, "If you finish that sentence with what I think you are about to say, I will feed you your own cock." Minthara cuts him off, her eyes narrowing into slits. The amount of times she had heard that particular theory from her fellow Nords was a very sore spot, and her draconic instincts were not helping. The townsfolk and many legionaries outright laughed at her reaction, but the young man would not be stopped. "So what? You will just let your own people be subjugated?" Even his comrades were giving him exasperated looks at this point. "Let them all die to that grey-skinned monstrosity they call a court mage?" "Noir says what?" A familiar voice resounds from behind the nobleman. "What?" He whirls around, coming face to face with two burning eyes, and wets his breeches in an instant. "Oi, Tullius!" The newly arrived raven calls out, "Why do you have Ulfric's brat with the grunts?" Ulfric's what now? Chapter 276, Chapter 2, Blackwings in the Cold. Raven's POV. Complete silence descended upon the central square of Helgen. My sudden entrance and the question that followed it stunned most people on the Imperial side, and even a good number of the Stormcloaks, judging by the gaping of what I presumed were the newer recruits. Most of the idiots probably didn't even know Ulfric had a son. Just as planned, the usual reaction to my existence gave me a perfect opportunity to give my long-missing apprentices a quick once-over. Both looked greatly changed by their abrupt adventure, both their auras and postures now giving the impression of seasoned travelers and warriors instead of the bumbling young adults that left Winterhold about a year ago. Marco completely embraced his origins as an elf from Skyrim, growing a short braided beard and wearing a very Viking-esque chainmail and gambeson combo, with the addition of a large cloak of dull yellow embroidered with decorative Nordic runes. His lute was in perfect condition and even seemed to have slightly adapted to him, going by the light hum of magicka simmering from within, while his blade, one of the Galderson's weapons, if I remembered correctly, had its grip replaced and its blade repaired with the hands of a master. He even seemed respectably built now, not that that would free him of his status as the elven twig of the group. As much as Marco looked changed, Minthara outright looked like a different person. Whatever instruction Titus provided her with left her projecting a sense of confidence and certainty, almost beckoning those around her to look at her and listen when she spoke. The scared and confused teenager I found in the slums of Solitude years ago was well and truly gone, replaced with a young woman who looked ready to take on the world. Also gone was her mismatched armor she either got from me or pilfered from the expedition to Blackreach, and in its place she now wore knightly plate armor over robes of black, crimson and gold, proudly displaying her heritage to all who knew to look. Truly, she was the image of a warrior noble, or she would have been had she not just threatened a man with force-feeding him his own genitalia. A Nordic warrior noble, then. She even took it a step further, wearing a red cloak with the sigil of House Septim covering a good chunk of its surface, and it was positioned perfectly for Elenwen to see it in its entirety, which brought me great amusement. But what truly drew my attention was the blade at her hip. At first glance, it looked like the usual blade's katana, but only a slightly deeper look allowed me to see the many soul fragments within, many of them actively looking at the other people present and were seemingly ready to react in some way should anything happen. One of the souls was even trying to stare at me, not that it would ever manage to pierce my shroud, but it was interesting to know they could take cues from their wielder. The unusual new toy made my inspection last just a split second longer than originally planned, leading to my focused gaze snapping her out of her surprised state and directing a glare of such fury at me I could actually feel the heat of it all the way here. It would seem my shenanigans were about to catch up to me. Distraction go. I ignore the furious demigod as my eyes snap to my dearest ambassador friend. The smile I give her in greeting sends chills down her spine as I spread my arms and start approaching her as if to offer a hug. "Elenwen, my dear," I exclaim. She outright flinches. "My world was darkened with your constant absence." Her assistant, an Altmer male wearing the signature robes of a justiciar, looks at me like I grew a second head, and almost falls on his arse in surprise as he sees his boss stuttering in fear as I approached her as if to embrace an old friend. She panics for a moment, but quickly composes herself. "A pleasure as always, Lord Dagoth." She forces out, not sounding all that pleasured, "But I am afraid I have no time for pleasantries. By your leave." Being a generous soul, I nod and let her run with her tail between her legs. By the time she heard of my dealings with Narcissus, she understood that I was someone who went well above her pay grade now, and she was now just a pretty little ornament in the icy lands of Skyrim, here only for the sake of her superior's pride. Oh, they could have escalated the situation and attempted to remove my influence in some convoluted plot. There was no doubt about that. I'd just have made them bleed for it if they did, and while the Thalmor may be fanatics, not even they were foolish enough to pay the blood price needed to dislodge me. So we entered an unspoken truce. They got their golden shiny asses of my damn lawn, and I stopped repeatedly humiliating them and butchering their expensive toy soldiers every time I could get away with it. Which was always. I sighed dramatically and turned to the gaping crowd. How very shy she is. Tullius, hiding an obvious smirk of vicious amusement, grunts in affirmation, but his job came first. What did you mean by your earlier statement? He asks for clarification. I point to the mouthy nobleman. That one goes by Skirnir. His dumb fuck of a father sent him out on a suicide mission to block the Pale Pass to prove himself a true Nord, or something equally inane. I give the kid a look of pity. He didn't even want to be here, but peer pressure does its thing, as always. The Stormcloaks all turn very irate at my words, but none are quite so lacking in the self-preservation department as to try and provoke me. Stormcloak propaganda may paint me as some maddened butcher, but it did serve its purpose when it came to shutting people up. How could we have missed this? Tullius asks with a frown, already giving the young man a once-over to confirm my words. Don't sweat it. I wave him off. Ulfric may be deluded, but he has been planning this for a long time. The recent losses must have stung his horde's pride a bit, so he had to reveal something positive to them, like having an heir, and he could not do it if said heir had no achievements to his name. I see. Tullius gives Skirnir a look of genuine pity, making him once again become red-faced. We will ensure he does not escape. See that you do. I offer him a nod of acceptance, and while he gets his legionaries to tighten up security so that they can go through the proceedings, I approach the others. Marco grins widely as he sees me coming and offers a handshake that I accept just as quickly. Finally stopped being a spindly little twig, have you? I ask in jest. I have indeed. He taps his armored chest. Now the ladies are truly unable to resist me. You still didn't get any in Cyrodiil, did you? I deadpan and he stumbles, clutching at his heart as if struck. Shaking my head, approach the still fuming Minthara with a shit-eating grin. Why if it isn't her ladyship herself? Her nostrils flare, and just as she is about to point her finger at me, and no doubt yell at me, I sidestep it and offer a quick hug, whispering in Dovazul as I did so. Prepare yourself. She stiffens at the sudden change of tone, but quickly nods, her hand twitching toward her sword as nervousness sinks in. The little Imperial agent that seems to be following her around watches me like a hawk with a deep frown. Whatever she learned about me led her to be very confused with my behavior, and she was no doubt allowing her well-trained paranoia to get to work in analyzing me. I had reached such a high level of bullshit, I no longer needed to purposefully torment those around me. The sound of Tullius talking draws our attention to the central square once more, just in time to find him standing in front of the captured rebels while surrounded by his guards. And as such, you are to be held captive for the duration of the uprising. Your fates shall be decided by the lawfully elected High King after everything settles. He gives Ulfric's son a pointed look, and no, you won't be getting heroically executed. Butchering every member of an uprising is neither wise nor is it productive, leading to even more embarrassment for the man. He goes on to speak further, but a distant roar stops him in his tracks. His eyes immediately snap to me. What was that? Evacuate everyone and have the troops man the scorpions. I answer immediately, the anticipation already building up within me as my mind goes over all of my preparations for this, the most auspicious of days. Thank fuck nobody can hear your cringeworthy thoughts. Scorch deadpans. Tullius does not wait for further explanation and starts barking orders. The prisoners get immediately manhandled toward the central keep, quickly followed by all non-combatants in reach. Many such scenes repeated throughout the town as suspicious masked figures started dragging whoever was dumb enough to still be dawdling deeper underground. The roar resounds once again, inducing bone-deep fear in most of those who could hear it. What is happening? A slightly panicky Marco asks while shaking my shoulder, though even through his panic he still held his sword at the ready. Instead of answering him, I look at Minthara with a grin I did not notice appearing on my face. Destiny has come. For a brief moment I see her pale in fear, but that lasts for a single flicker before she draws her sword, its orichalcum blade alight with the power of an unfamiliar enchantment, and readies herself. Once again, the roar assaults our hearing, even closer than before. Whatever it is approaching us fast, Marco states the obvious. Junior gives Minthara a look as if to suggest a retreat, but that only earns her a death glare from the demigod. My limbs quiver in anticipation, and Scorch, the absolute mad lad, starts chanting the song of the Dragonborn through our connection. With a sonic boom that sends most of us reeling to the ground, a massive black blur smashes into one of the distant towers, being almost of the same size, and bursts through the other end, ruining it utterly in the process. And as if that were not enough, the twat flies up into the air, his massive pitch-black form blotting out the sun with his mere presence. His aura presses onto my mind and body without him doing anything, and I know then and there that no matter how weakened, I was in the presence of a god. And then he speaks, Strun ma gol's yol. His words shake the very earth and set the skies on fire as a rift opens right above the town, disgorging hundreds of flaming rocks on our heads. My hands are already moving, summoning wards, slapping the rocks away with telekinesis, summoning shades to rescue those that get trapped, and activating the reinforcing enchantments I placed under the ground weeks ago, just buying enough time for everyone possible to get out of the way before the real battle started. It took the rest a bit longer to gather their courage, a mere couple of seconds without any retaliation to the creature that just ruined half of the city with 4 words, and wasn't that a pleasant surprise? But as their guts returned to them, bolts and spells started flying at the godling flying above us, most of the attacks getting outright bounced off his scales. Lucky shots still happened, and the apocalyptic fuck was still too cautious after ripping his way through the time wound, allowing us to complete the evacuation of the non-combatants by the time he realized we were doing no real damage. A grinding noise that sounded suspiciously close to mocking laughter shook the ground once again. You do not flee, Jaw. The voice of death itself came from every direction. You may entertain me yet. And with that, he lunged, right into my proverbial jaws. Sunmargul's Yol is Stormfall Stonefire. Chapter 277. Chapter 3. The Taste of Defeat. Time seemed to slow down as the mass of pitch-black scales barreled straight toward us. His eyes briefly twitched in my direction, but his attention was swiftly taken by Minthara glaring at him and greeting him with her own voice, Fus Ro Da. I could practically taste his contempt as he simply stated Bo, and ripped through the space in front of him, appearing directly above her, already mid-swing with his front claws. Which was exactly what I was waiting for as I activated the massive spell circle buried below the stone, immediately directing the many soul gems embedded within into a grand alteration spell. An immense spike of earth struck out against the dragon, turning to steel faster than the eye could perceive, and was just about to impale him under his jaw. But that was not all, as numerous spots in the pavement were shattered by dozens of my ballistae automatons, their enchanted bolts flashing out in glorious crimson as they targeted him from every conceivable direction. Strunma! The cold voice resounded once again, a tinge of amusement coloring it this time. Briefly, I was confused by what he meant by calling out a mountain, and then had that confusion shattered completely as I felt his metaphysical weight increase, crushing a few of the legionaries that were unlucky enough to be close to him outright, and forcing the rest of us to struggle to remain standing. The ballista bolts I had spent so long enchanting detonated in a deafening boom, doing absolutely nothing whatsoever to the now enhanced scales, and some of them even bounced off, doing even more damage to the town. Stop worrying about the damages and move to Plan B, you swit. The spike of steel went completely ignored as Alduin simply twisted out of its path with a speed that definitely should not belong to something that large and batted it away with one of his claws, ripping the thing out of the ground and launching it into a nearby tower, blowing it to tiny pieces and likely killing everyone still atop it. Minthara, rather foolishly, did not hesitate to charge at the now grounded beast. Swinging her new blade with surprising speed, she moved as fast as the greatest mortal warriors I have fought before, delivering a swift cut across one of his arms, immediately supported by a shower of lightning from Marco, who was already making sure he had enough distance to run away if needed. No one would judge him for it when he did. Alduin actually winced slightly at the sudden stinging sensation and immediately whipped his tail toward the surprised dragonborn, who was too busy gawking at actually hurting the weakened godling. "Not the fucking time to gawk, Minthara," I yelled and immediately changed target from the gigantic cunt's face and started blasting the offending tail with dozens of spells of each element, slowing it down just enough for her to get out of the way and even managing to shear off some smaller scales, which then regenerated. But a dragon's whole body was a living weapon, doubly so in the case of a dragon god. While we were focusing on a single limb, he was already swinging out with both his arms, the pitch-black claws practically flashing into existence before us. I only had a split second to shadow step out of the way of the blow that completely shattered the house behind me without even touching it. Suppressing my twinge of panic at the possibility of him outright killing Minthara, I appeared behind him just in time to see the result. I will admit I did gape a bit when I saw her sword glowing a brilliant gold and a good 10 shimmering ghosts, vaguely resembling the blades from the Septim era, all blocking the blow together with perfect coordination. Even the big bad dragon was distracted and looked like he was about to start mocking her. I naturally did not waste the opportunity and immediately invoked Magnus's gaze, directing his staff straight at the arsehole's arsehole and combining all the elements into a single disintegration beam, just as Savos taught me. And just to make sure it stuck, I shouted, "Jor Zar Frul." The shout struck its target perfectly, shimmering over his scales in its baleful blue hue, but I could already feel the mountain shout still having an effect as the added weight worked to resist my curse. And then my spell struck. A roar of pain and, more prominently, indignation almost blew out my eardrums as Alduin was slammed into the ground with the magical power of a god channeled by an archmage. Minthara wasted no time in turning to the attack and started slashing at him like a complete madwoman, her own magic working to speed her up as much as inhumanly possible as numerous cuts appeared on the World Ender's pace. And then my 6 seconds ran out. "Tid!" came the clipped shout from the enraged dragon. Time slowed down to a near halt, only Akatosh's blessing letting me see those 2 hateful orbs he called eyes focus their full intent on me and the mountain of black scales snapping around in an attempt to devour me, smacking Minthara in the face in the process and launching her straight at Marco. My robes activated before I could even register the event, letting the jaws harmlessly pass through me and buying me just enough time to activate my next spell before the slowed time could drain my ethereal form. Space cracked in front of me, and I disappeared from my previous spot, suddenly standing hundreds of meters above the almost completely destroyed town. Even from here, I could see the battle still going on. Spells and bolts were still flying at the furious dragon, who ignored them all in his fixation on finding the mortal who humiliated him. I naturally would oblige. Letting loose the levitation spell I activated on pure instinct, I let myself descend into a freefall, Oriel's bow already in my hands, and as much magicka as I could push within, bursting from within me. Alduin's eyes snapped upwards, widening briefly as he felt the aura of my weapon. My plan seemed to have worked, as those same eyes were suddenly alight with fury, a predictably cruel shout, leaving him in the next instant, "Rai Vaz Du!" Anyone else would have been stunned by pants-shitting terror as the fucker literally attempted to eat my soul for daring to fight back. But I had long since prepared myself for his potential conceptual powers as my shroud, allowed me to simply ignore the crime against nature directed at me. Alduin had just enough time to blink in surprise as the overcharged sun-hallowed arrow found its way straight into his gaping maw, exploding within him a blink later. Once again, I cracked the space around me, avoiding the claw attempting to skewer me and appearing to his side, my hands already weaving a new spell as he coughed in brain-melting pain. Something told me, though, that that cough was anything but. And then, for the first time in a long time, my precognition failed utterly as I was suddenly smashed aside with an absent tail swing, thankfully not getting impaled on anything in the process, as my offhand already went to work speeding up my healing. As I got up, I could see Alduin leveling another glare at me. "You are a bold one indeed," he snarled. "You should be honored, mortal. Your soul shall serve as my first meal in this accursed world." He must have expected something else because my following words actually made him stop for a moment. the attacks of the Legion and my animunculi still completely ignored. How about no? Enough, he barks. I have toyed with you fools long enough. Vokrai mulag kya. Did he just use a fucking dragon aspect as a dragon? I deadpan at the unfairness of the world, and then quickly book it as he practically teleports in front of me, whatever shout he used to bypass my clairvoyance going unused as he was focusing on keeping his current one going. With each narrow dodge, I blasted him with more spells, re-shouting Dragon Rend every single time he managed to shrug it off, my throat bleeding due to the strain. Buildings were blown up or crushed each second as our merry chase continued, numerous soldiers dying as Tullius's order to disperse could never remove the simple factor of dumb bad luck. I led him back toward the square once more, straight down the lane my ballistae had repositioned themselves toward, all of them aiming at one of the bigger wounds on his rear leg as I blasted him with my last Dragon Rend before my voice gave out completely. The sudden limp slowed him down just enough for me to blast even more disintegration beams down his maw, pushing him back even further in the hopes of making him fuck off. And almost as if sensing the connection, the fucker smashed all of them, including Gatecrasher, turning it into fine chunks and sending the bits of orichalcum flying in all directions. I blinked in a mix of sadness and resignation. Now it was personal. Dragon flesh replaced mortal might, and blasphemy appeared in my hand, my very blood filling the blade with the power to deny a god. And then the fucker sped up so much that even with clairvoyance I could not stop what happened next. He appeared in front of me, and with one swing shattered my mask, removed my jaw and probably a good chunk of my face. I don't know because I could not really think at that moment. And then he blasted me with what I vaguely recognized as a wordless, unrelenting force. Shit. Minthara's POV. Faster, I yell at the 20 soldiers who volunteered to follow me, Hadvar, Marco, and Junior among their number. Marco spoke through his huffing breaths. We won't be able to help if we are dead on our feet when we get to them. We just healed. I don't care, I snarl, and finally step out into the central square just in time to see the World Eater staring down at a completely butchered raven. A fair number of his limbs thrown about and his prized blade impaled into the ground beside him. Know this mortal, Alduin rumbles. You were strong. Would nar kest. I don't need to listen anymore as I heft my hammer and launch myself at his head. The weapon that had already slain a dragon once before brimming with arcane power as the amulet hidden beneath my armor once more filled me with an unending feeling of certainty and purpose. Alduin's head twitched to the side, redirecting the thunderous hammer blow to one of his horns. My blood sang with glee as said horn shattered on impact, sending him stumbling back with a disoriented grunt of pain. Immediately I went in for another swing, ducking below a claw swipe and smacking the side of his head in the same spot Marco had just blasted him with lightning. Suddenly the World Eater retreated, the shimmering shield around his body weakening as if a timer had run out. His eyes loomed down at me knowingly, and then he spoke. This will do. He stated, we shall see each other soon. Dovahkiin, Bo. Because of course the literal god of destruction was smart enough not to keep fighting when weakened, just what I needed. And then he was already far up in the skies, his form disappearing on the distant horizon mere seconds later. Not allowing myself to relax, I whirled on Raven's battered form, hoping against hope that he was still alive. But there was someone else there, a lightly armored Dunmer I quickly recognized as Davos jabbing some kind of blade with red liquid contained within its far too thick hilt into his stomach. I went to see what was happening, but a hand on my shoulder stopped me. My eyes snapped to my right, and I was greeted with the sight of an unfamiliar Falmer in an ornate, seemingly monastic plate armor. Calm yourself, child. The Lord was prepared for such an eventuality. His aged, soothing voice did actually serve to dampen the fire coursing through my veins, just a little. I must have remained distracted for far longer than I noticed, because in the next instant I was looking at a half-naked Dunmer who was stretching himself like nothing happened. A very satisfied smirk on his face as he asked, so what did I miss? Bo is to move, fly. Strunmar means mountain. Rai Vaz Du is essence tear devour. Vokri Mulag Qa means restore strength and armor. Chapter 278, Chapter 4, The Silent Rubble. Raven's POV. Consciousness slams back into me like a hammer, the sudden lack of deathly suffocation forcing me to take in deep gulps of air before I finally manage to calm down. My freshly rebuilt eyes sting as they snap open and take in the scene above me, a leveled city. A panicking redhead held back by the eternally patient paladin, and the frowning Davos getting up from just having stabbed me with a potion syringe I had made for such situations. Tapping myself down habitually, I get up and survey the city once again while stretching lazily, my bones letting out satisfying cracks as if I had just woken up from the most pleasant of naps. The scene before me was far worse than I remember it being. Most of the town was utterly flattened, and what was not was barely held together by whatever lucky support was not crushed by either Alduin's flight or my own spells. Then again, that was par for the course, considering the fact the literal god of destruction of this universe paid it a visit, and the vast majority of the people were safely tucked away in the underground caverns. They would recover, and in the end that was all that mattered. And yet, even as I observed scattered groups of legionaries dragging away what corpses survived amongst the hundreds that did not, I could not feel anything but excitement. I had stood up to a god, no matter how futilely, and came out of it alive. Probably made the fucker cautious as well, which ought to buy us time if anything. Or it could doom us all, and ain't that a cheery thought? The amount of self-assured pride now coursing through my veins would probably manage to topple even the vast ego of my ancestor if we were to meet. But sadly such things were not to last, as my sudden lack of deathly wounds made me draw quite a bit of attention from the rest of those present. "So," I ask with an insultingly satisfied grin, considering the situation, "what did I miss?" The silence stretches for a few moments as most of their brains try to connect me with the mangled mess they found. But as one might expect, the literal demigod breaks out of it first and points at me. "Put some damned clothes on." I give her the driest deadpan in my arsenal. Yes, let me just holler over to the god of death and destruction so that he can repair the robes he destroyed. I am sure he will be sporting about the whole thing. She covers her face with a hand and takes a fortifying breath, failing to completely hide the slightest hint of a blush on her face, and speaks again. "I know you always carry a bunch with you. Stop being contrarian, you arse." Or, "I was hoping your time south did not make you less fun to annoy, but I guess a Mer cannot have his eggs and eat them." I shrug, ignoring the glare being sent my way, and snap my fingers, clothing myself in luxurious noble attire in the blink of an eye, and summoning a cigar for good measure. "That proper enough for you, my lady?" I ask mockingly as the stick of magic drugs lights itself. "Yes." Her eye twitches, the glare soon softening into the true expression of her inner concern. "Are you sure you are well? When we found you." She trails off, paling ever so slightly. I wave the whole thing off. The fact that I am alive is a bloody miracle, and I thank the gods for the fact the fucker was weakened when he ripped his way back into the world, or all of us would have been so thoroughly fucked even Molag Bal would wince at the sight. A good number of the legionaries that followed the group here blanch at my words, but the rest are too used to me to react in any way. "So I was right in thinking that that is why he ran off?" Minthara asks. "Because he was still weakened?" "That is the most probable reason." I nod. It took an army of tongues and an elder scroll to send him forth in time, mostly intact, and a small legionary garrison, even with our help, stood no chance at pushing him back, much less defeating him at his prime. There are some very unsatisfied and even despaired looks all around, but it is Minthara who speaks once more. "What are we supposed to do against that kind of monster then?" I give her a knowing look. "You know exactly what you must do." Her lips thin and her eyes narrow as she remembers the first time she consumed a dragon soul. The genuine disgust at the idea she was radiating actually brought me a small amount of assurance she wasn't about to go insane with the power, but who knew how long that would last before her mind was overtaken with the thousands upon thousands of years of memories she would consume. But we can discuss that later. I raise a hand to interrupt and turn around with a respectful but not deferential salute. "General, I am glad to see you survived. I am sure you would have known immediately if I died, but I will take your words in the spirit they were given." He greets dryly by saluting back. I trust that we are now safe. As safe as we can be with the new state of the world. I respond evasively, but no, I don't think we will be getting attacked again soon in any case. Good. His answer is clipped, but I see the slightest relaxing of his shoulders. The attack had rattled even him. Still, the man was a seasoned general for a reason, and he proves as such as he focuses back on the present. What was that thing? I started walking away without answering initially, quickly waving for those relevant to follow me, while the rest went to work doing emergency repairs or looking for people to heal. We make some distance, finding ourselves in a thoroughly burned but at least hidden part of the town. As we stop, I turn back to Tullus. How far into your study of the Nords are you? He frowns slightly, but trusts me enough to know that my question has a point and answers, I have read up on multiple traditions and legends. Why? Have you ever chanced upon the legend of Alduin the World Eater? I ask, and a weight descends upon the hidden alcove. I have. Tullius answers automatically and then stops himself, his eyes snapping to mine. You don't mean? But I do, General. I grin. That big black bastard that ruined the town was no beast. That was a god. Most of those who had been already informed of the likely future barely react to the information, but the likes of Gelibor, Junior, and Tullius reward my words with genuine horror in their eyes. A silent moment later, Tullius speaks once more, a weak mutter leaving him. Have the gods truly abandoned us so thoroughly? Without any warning, I approach the man and tap him on the shoulder, making him wince at the force. Worry not, General. They may have decided to be cunts about it, but they did send us some help in their usual manner. Raven? The older man's despair is momentarily overtaken by exasperation as he deadpans, Control your sadism for a moment and tell me, this is important. Fine, fine. I raise my hands in surrender before lowering them and pointing to the exasperated Minthara. It is my honor to introduce to you one Lady Minthara Septim, adopted daughter of Titus Mede II and the youngest child of Akatosh. Your dramatics entertain no one but yourself, the annoyed demigod accuses while she still has the chance. Which is exactly enough. I smile and offer a light bow. Enjoy. Gelibor is the first to react as his eyes almost pop out of his skull and he starts asking a downright uncomfortable amount of questions, only to swiftly be out-yelled by the downright baffled general trying to grasp at his liege lord's thinking. Davos, who had silently moved to my side while everyone was busy staring, points at Gelibor and whispers, "You sure telling Mr. High and Mighty about the literal child of his god is a good idea. Best let him adapt as quickly as possible. Lying about it would have just led to resentment later on." I explain without looking at him. Still, it would be prudent to have him watched in case his loyalties change. Was already planning on it, boss, Davos confirms lazily, already adapting to the increasing amount of responsibility I was sending his way. What use were subordinates if you had to micromanage everything they did anyway? The sudden and rather heated conversation died down not long after it started. Having a princess of their empire, demigod of their religion, yell at them to shut their mouths for one bloody second did cause some amusing reactions from the recipients, but it did shut them up. The glare she sent me as well naturally passed me by like a light breeze. Once more, it was Tullius who broke the silence as he looked at me with an odd expression. I am unsure if I should be amazed or horrified at how much of this you had planned out. I smile smugly. I am at all times 20 moves ahead of everyone else. And these moves included getting mauled to near death, Minthara snips, visibly holding herself back from punching my smug face. Of course. My smile doesn't falter for a second. Wait. She stops herself suddenly. You knew you would lose and still went to battle anyway. Yup. I raise my thumb cheerfully. All part of the plan. For the first time since I got healed, Marco speaks, visible relief on his face. For a moment there, I thought you fought him because you wanted to have some fun. Good thing you have more sense than that. The wide grin I give him immediately after his words makes him pale and mutter a weak "gods no," but I hold no mercy. Of course I wanted to fight a literal god and see where I stand. The chances of death were relatively low anyways. I wave the whole thing off like it is nothing, ignoring the general looking like he just swallowed a lemon. Besides, I had to hurt him to make him reluctant to do this kind of shit again. If I didn't, then he would be far more aggressive and random in how he did things. Most of those present, and especially the Nord, give me respectful looks at that. But there are always cunts wherever one goes. Yes, and now he shall focus solely on us. Junior speaks up with a frown, a rather foolish choice. Random, unimportant mook says what? I ask quickly, and send a nudge of illusion to make her ask. What? The penitus oculatus agent blurts and quickly covers her mouth, immediately realizing what happened and glaring at me. Your posturing does nothing but endanger the only person who has any chance of stopping the enemy. Yes, I drawl, and I do wonder what said person thinks about sacrificing entire cities just so she could have an extra month or two to get stronger. Minthara immediately starts shaking her head in disgust. My point exactly. I offer a smug nod to the frowning agent and turn back to Tullius. I will be taking them to my base of operations now. They need to be prepared for what is to come, and I have some contemplation to get to after that whole debacle. Of course. Tullius agrees with a mix of annoyance and understanding. I will ensure the townspeople are taken care of. He turns to march off, but I stop him by clearing my throat, an automaton control rod appearing in my hand a moment later. Give this to your most competent mage. It will give you command of the 100 or so spiders I left behind. Use it to give them some shelter for the night at least. He takes the rod almost reverently and nods. Of course. Then he marches off. All right then. I turn to the rest. I do hope you all didn't overeat before this. What? Marco goes to ask, but I had already clapped my hands, a wide blue magic circle appearing below us and the space cracking loudly. Before anyone could even blink, we found ourselves standing atop a snowy rise, a sprawling town of marble walls and towers stretching before us. Welcome, dear guests, to Silrune Fell. I spread my arms dramatically, but none of the new arrivals noticed, as they were too busy gawking. Task failed successfully. Silrune Fell, City Home of Light. Chapter 279, Chapter 5, Silrune Fell. General POV. As the court mage made the entire group disappear to who knows where General Tullius allowed himself to relax ever so slightly. The task given to him by his liege was now far harder to complete, and his honed mind failed utterly in not thinking about the amount of work it would take to deal with it all. And then there was the sudden challenge of his faith in the gods. He knew the elf was not at fault, but he still felt like cursing the young mage, if only to make himself feel slightly better. Accepting his fate, he started making his way back to his men. The oddly shaped control rod twirling between his fingers without thought. Idly, he let his meager store of magicka flow into the object, and immediately felt exactly 100 connections in his mind. At first he was freaked out by the sudden sensation, but the mechanism of it all was made obvious by the new instinct in the back of his mind. And so, with far more caution this time, the good general sent out his first command without speaking, a small horde of metallic spiders converging around the town square and starting to construct a rudimentary shelter. He did not even notice it as a childlike smile formed on his face, and he continued playing with his new toys, the projects he ordered growing ever more complex and precise. He also did not notice the slight magicka drain the artifact imposed. His troops found him heaving on the ground an hour later, a tired but satisfied look on his face. At Silrune Fell. Ignoring Raven's declaration, the group of newcomers gawked at the sight they were greeted with. An untouched valley covered in creeks, trees, and fresh spring grass spread out for miles, the whole thing surrounded by mountains and covered in a slight fog, giving it a feeling of an almost supernatural peace and tranquility. Naturally, the gods being fickle as they are, that tranquility was swiftly crushed as a noise drew their attention below them, leading them to the sight of a long canyon filled with fortifications and walled off with mighty battlements and towers at its entrance. All of them being rather sharp-eyed due to their experience and/or training, they could see quite clearly the small horde of feral Falmer attacking the walls with reckless abandon, while numerous automaton spheres let loose their bolts under the watchful eye of about 24 armored warriors, many of whom were armed with crossbows, and one of whom was currently producing the noise by throwing fireballs with passable accuracy. Marco gave his host and teacher an odd look. "Shouldn't you?" but was immediately waved off. "Nah, poor idiots attack almost daily. Serves as good training for the newbies anyway, so I let them deal with it from relative safety." He glances at the fireball-chucking maniac and tisks in annoyance. Idiot is going to knock himself out at this rate. Davos, go and make sure he doesn't die over something as stupid as that, and then make sure the lesson sticks. "Sure thing, boss." The Dunmer salutes and disappears before anyone can notice him speaking in the first place. "Even if they are feral, I know these Falmer are not complete beasts." Minthara speaks up, pointedly not looking at the paladin, staring at her with complete focus. "So why is it that they are simply throwing themselves at your people like this? And where even are we?" Raven waved for them to follow him and explained on the way, "To answer your first question, it is because we stole the shamans of almost every tribe out there." "Dare I ask why?" Minthara asks, completely unbothered by the idea. "Because only the mages can be restored." Raven shrugs. "I'd happily fix the rest, but the resource investment would be enough to topple the Dominion, so I sadly have to settle with only doing what I can." "And how many have you managed to restore so far?" Junior pipes in. Lord Dagoth gives her an amused look. "Already fishing for information, are we?" Before she can answer, he waves her off. "Don't bother, I expected as much and do not fear answering. There are currently 124 full Falmer living in the settlement, with another 250 on their way to restoration." "That is enough to start a population," Marco mumbles with slight amazement. "It is, but that is enough about that." Raven nods and looks back to Minthara. "As to your second question, we are in the place previously known as the Forgotten Vale, a valley hidden deep in Skyrim's western mountains and the location of the Chantry of Oriel, or Akatosh if you prefer. It is also where I met Gelebor here, one of the only 5 Falmer I did not have to restore." "There was a tribe of actual snow elves still alive?" The Dragonborn gives the paladin a surprised look. Gelebor smiles wistfully and shakes his head. "I am afraid not, my lady. I was granted longevity by Oriel, so that I may persevere in my duties of keeping my blasphemous brother imprisoned. It is Lord Dagoth who set me free from my task and unfroze 4 of my fellow paladins when he came here to cleanse the Chantry with his army." "I feel like there was a lot left out of that story," she mutters suspiciously. The paladin immediately bows. "When we have time, I would be more than happy to tell you everything you wish to know, your ladyship." The constant bowing and, in her eyes, unearned reverence was slowly starting to irritate her, but much to Raven's surprise, he could only see her left eye twitch slightly before she offered the elven devotee a polite smile and continued walking. The conversation trailed off by that point, as the visitors were once more drawn to the view before them. Orderly plots carved into the stony walls of the mountain at the canyon's upper exit and spreading out in a vague eye shape dotted the entire path between them and their destination. Every home was hewn of marble and roofed with pale blue tiles, all of them shaped in an unrecognizable style that seemed to be a mix of Dunmer with something else. But somehow the elegant arches of the unknown culture, combined with the sharp edges of the Dunmer, worked almost perfectly. They were not all of uniform size, but most seemed to be able to house a family of 5 and had a front garden with vegetables already growing. Animals were only permitted to be raised off the main path, so they were out of sight, and more importantly, outside of anyone's smelling range. The paved road led the group through a central square where a small market was already being assembled. Stalls made of a similar marble-like stone dotted the place in an organized chaos, as Dunmer and Falmer, and even some Nords who were until then trying to sell their wares, all turned silent and offered respectful bows to them as they passed. Their destination made itself rather obvious when they crested a small rise and came upon the Chantry of Oriel, the mostly restored monument almost glowing in the sunlight and covering all of those carrying the Chief Divine's blessing in a warm embrace. But that was not what drew most of their attention, as a massive pale tower, covered in the banners of House Dagoth, towered over even the Chantry itself. Numerous windows and terraces dotted the massive structure in what was once more an organized kind of chaos. If one looked hard enough, they could even see Nightshade currently resting in a comfortable chair at one of the higher terraces, while a small Dunmer child gave her a report on her studies. Raven's POV. I lead the group to the nearby way shrine, the teleportation device immediately reacting to my presence and opening up a path that was not there before. Wordlessly, I step through, and I only have to wait for a couple of seconds before the rest also start entering one after the other. And this, my dear guests, is Tel Dagoth, my new home. I spread my arms welcomingly. Minthara gives me a dry look. The Tower of Dagoth. Not very creative, is it? It is tradition, I shrug helplessly. Besides, that is exactly what it is. The tower where House Dagoth houses their magi. Without waiting for a reply, I turn to the tall elf sitting at the podium in front of the portal. Alor makes sure they all have a place to stay and show them where they can get some food. He immediately stands up and gives me a quick bow. At once, my lord. I turn to the guests and offer them a smile. You are welcome in my home. Rest, eat, recuperate, and when you are ready, we will speak of our future plans. I leave Alor to deal with the logistics and head to the top of the tower, my favorite place to relax as of late. The center of the tower was hollowed out in a cylindrical shape, allowing anyone to levitate to the summit if they were skilled and powerful enough, but still having stairs for the lower levels. I was a cunt, but I still wasn't a Telvanni-level cunt. The fresh mountain breeze greeted me once more as I stepped onto the open space atop the tower. I could not resist adding some Orthanc-esque spikes to the top, but I still made sure the place had an actual use as I created a resort-level lounge with automatic heating, massaging chairs, and everything else I could come up with. I may not have liked my past existence, but the conveniences and luxuries of it far surpassed most of what I could find in this world, so I simply decided to combine both. I sat my ass down and lit up a cigar, mentally counting down to 0 exactly as Minthara burst through the enchanted passage in the floor. She was very lucky I already predicted this and allowed her up there, or she would have been slammed into the floor all the way down. She would have survived, probably, but it would not have been a pleasant experience, that much was certain. "Ah, Lady Septim," I grinned cheerfully, "what a surprise to see you up here." She glares at me for a moment, but seeing as I do not so much as twitch, she quickly deflates and takes a seat across me. A low moan of comfort, leaving her unbidden as she practically melts into the reclining armchair. It takes her a moment to come to her senses, and the instant she does, she is greeted with my smug ass, giving her a shit-eating grin. "I knew you were tired, but I did not expect the mere touch." "Stop," she groans, trying to hide her embarrassment. "Just stop." Hehehe. I let out a brief cackle of pure evil before asking, "Fine, what did you want?" She takes a long, fortifying breath, leans back into her seat, contemplates her thoughts for a while and asks, "Why did you contact the Emperor?" "Is that any way to talk about your father?" I quip, and ignoring the frustrated noise akin to a boiling kettle, I go on, "I contacted him because he is someone genuinely devoted to making the Empire, and thus in his eyes, the world a better place. He is also heirless, and even a child could do the math if they knew what I know." She goes to speak, but I raise a hand. "Let me speak now, you asked the damn question." Earning myself a nod, I continue. "As I was saying, he is a good man, and the truth of your ancestry would have come out sooner or later, leading to people trying to prop you up on the ruby throne as their puppet, and so I thought I may as well make sure you get the best deal you could. I totally believe you did it out of the goodness of your heart." She deadpans, obviously not believing that one bit, still. She sighs, "I can't say that you are wrong in saying that I would never be left alone, Septim or not." "Exactly." I nod with a satisfied smile. "Truth now, please," she demands with her own amused smile. I outright snort at this. "Fine, you are the best chance this world has to topple the Dominion. And so I decided to give you something to do, instead of fading into obscurity once you have done your divinely ordained duty." "That is fair, I guess." She deflates into her seat. She stares into the distance for a long while after that, before slowly looking back at me. "And yet I cannot shake off the feeling that you have been controlling my every move for years now." "Oh, please don't flatter yourself." I cackle at her suddenly offended expression. "I made sure you would grow stronger to face what no one else can. And then I made sure I would have an amiable monarch when it was all said and done. I am not about to apologize for it. I am disgusted at myself for not being able to find fault with that anymore. She grumbles, absently grabbing the bottle of mead I summoned while we were talking. Ah, how quickly they grow. I sigh forlornly. I am older than you twat, she snaps with no heat, and your aged wisdom impresses us with each day that passes. I drawl. We stay silent for a moment before the both of us let out huffs of amusement and shake our heads. Also, I add after a pause, it isn't like you have no talent or desire for leadership. I saw how they looked at you in Helgen and how you tried to hide your preening. Don't try to pretend otherwise. She tries to come up with a denial, but after a moment she remembers who she was talking to and deflates. Yes, fine. I do enjoy people looking up to me. Happy? She almost pouts at the admission. I simply smirk at that. She glares. Have more questions. She begins once more, but one refuses to leave me no matter what I do. How did you even get into contact with the Emperor in the first place? Well now, that is an interesting story. I take a sip of coffee, summon one for her, which she happily accepts, and begin my tale. Chapter 280, Chapter 6, of Alliances and Advancements. Flashback, General POV. The peaceful rustling of Bruma's northern forests was broken as a small group of mounted men rode through its less overgrown paths at a rapid pace, a pack of large hunting dogs guiding them forward, and after a magnificent boar moving at speeds high enough to shatter whatever was unfortunate enough to find itself in front of it, as attested by multiple trees turned into fine chunks. One of the horsemen handed the older man, riding next to him, a loaded crossbow, the elder immediately aiming it with expert proficiency, born from decades of use, and nailing the boar right into one of its back legs, hamstringing it and causing it to topple over its own weight. The inertia carrying it straight into the path of a pair of young imperial men armed with long hunting spears. They wasted no time in skewering the beast through the eye and neck. The old man dismounted and fearlessly approached the rapidly dying creature, his excitement reflecting in his steps. A big bastard, isn't he, Maro? He looked to one of the men following him with a wide grin. The captain of the Emperor's bodyguards allowed himself to relax as the boar finally breathed its last, "That he was, your majesty." He droned, his thoughts too occupied with something else. "It is my duty to caution you against doing this again, my liege. We cannot protect you from nature's wrath or simple bad luck, and if you were to suffer an accident here, the Empire would not survive. You have yet to declare an heir, and the vultures are already gathering." Titus Mede II merely waved him away with a knowing smirk. "Do not worry yourself overmuch, my good man. We are here for more reason than the personal amusement of an old fart." The bodyguard ignored his lord's crass comment and immediately tensed up, suddenly paying a lot more attention to his surroundings, but failed to find anything. And what exactly are we doing in the middle of a lord's forest if not hunting? Meeting a possible ally, and should it go well, creating a better future for the Empire. The Emperor answered evasively. Before he could ask any more questions, the nearby shadows convulsed unnaturally, twisting around each other and forming into the tall and imposing figure of a Dunmer clad in magnificent robes. The individual's power was such that even the unattuned could feel the mountain of magicka before them. Maro was thoroughly informed about all the big players in the world, so it did not take him even a second to recognize their guest. "What are you doing here?" he asked while grasping the hilt of his sword, the rest of the Imperials following suit. "Peace now." The Emperor raised his hand to forestall them. "I am afraid that even if we were all to attack him at once, we would do no more than merely amuse him. Am I not right, Lord Dagoth?" The elf let out a brief chuckle at that. "You sure know how to flatter someone, old man." Ignoring the offended sputterings of his servants, the Emperor too let out a light laugh. "Years of experience, I am afraid." He starts walking and signals his people to wait where they are, much to their protest. "Walk with me," Titus calls out, and Raven falls into step beside him. Once they are out of hearing range, he speaks. "It is good that we finally meet in person. That business with your father forced me into making a difficult decision, and I feared you would resent me for it." "Maybe I still do." The elf hums. "Maybe I lured you here to take revenge." Titus huffs. "Then go ahead and kill me. I do not fear the god's judgment." A silent moment passes before Raven tisks in annoyance, "Crazy old man." "Why, thank you very much." The Emperor offers him a light bow for his praise. "I am not a child," Raven states after a brief silence. "I understand that it is the Thalmor who are at fault, and demanding that an entire empire increase tensions when it cannot afford to do so over one person would be both foolish and incredibly hypocritical of me." A rather mature outlook for someone so young. Titus eyes him with a raised eyebrow, approval twinkling in his eyes. "I am happy to see that the son takes after the father, and doubly so for your offer of cooperation. Speaking of..." He gives the elf an annoyed look. "The letters you sent me were rather vague. I had to keep them to myself, or else my own advisors might consider me a complete lunatic." He shakes his head. "Found a septim dragonborn," he says, as if an old man's heart can take such declarations lightly. "Oh, please, you have at least another century in you." Raven rolls his eyes, easily spotting the signs of immense vitality within the powerful warrior and emperor. "Besides, it isn't like I was lying. She just doesn't know the fact herself quite yet. I had several options for a potential heir, none of them ideal." The Emperor grumbles, "And then you come out of nowhere and offer me a literal divinely gifted option." Of course there had to be caveats. "As there are in most things." Raven nods. "Besides, since when does Akatosh send forth a dragonborn without good reason?" Titus frowns. "And what is the reason?" "Alduin, the World Eater's return," Raven informs him in a clipped tone. The Emperor searches his mind for the relevant prophecy or legend and quickly pales as he realizes the form of calamity that would soon ravage the world. Still a ray of hope remained. "You have been preparing for this." It was a statement, not a question. "I have." The Archmage nods. "And I have also been helping her prepare as much as I could." "But," Titus gives him an expectant look. "But something drew her to Cyrodiil recently." The elf grumbles. "Whatever divinity was hidden within her has likely awakened when she consumed the dragon soul in Blackreach and has led her south. She has probably already crossed the border by now." "And what is it that you wish me to do with this information?" the Emperor asks. Raven shrugs. "Shadow her, observe her, hell, even test her if you like. She holds near infinite potential, but it is just that, potential. If you truly wish for the Empire to endure under her rule, then I want you to invest yourself fully in the return of the Septims, and that starts with your own initiative." Titus stops walking briefly, seemingly deep in thought, his expression shifting multiple times before settling on a devious smile. "Yes, I do believe I will be testing her. My thanks for your advice, dear boy." "I live to serve," Raven bows dramatically, both of the serial annoyances breaking out into cackles of pure evil. Back to the present, Raven's POV. "That bastard!" Minthara almost jumps from her seat in rage. "He knew what I was doing the entire time." She stops yelling and suddenly pales. "Oh no, he knew what I was doing the entire time." I pointedly look at anywhere but her. Her eyes narrow. "Don't tell me you also had people shadowing us." I whistle innocently. She glares at me for a brief moment, but quickly accepts that this was indeed her life now and leans back into her seat. "You could have at least had them give us some food when we ran low." She grumbles. "Oh? And should I also wipe your ass for you?" I raise an eyebrow while pointing at her. "The two of you got too used to me coddling you, and Titus needed to see what you were made of." She resumes her grumbling, but it is mostly just cursing the world for making her important. Once she calms down, she looks up again. "Honestly, I would have preferred the wandering and constant battle to the training that came after." "Oh yeah, that." I hold back a chuckle, pretending to sympathize. "I heard it was rather terrible." Flashback. I seat myself next to Titus as he observes an angry Minthara yelling at her etiquette teacher about not even thinking to tell her what she could and could not wear, and the older woman simply looking at her like she was an idiot child and promptly tearing her a new one. "Damn, this is fun to watch," I chuckle. "Told you." The supremely entertained Emperor smirks. Back to the present. "Raven," her voice raises threateningly. "Right, I just remembered I had something to do." I get up from my seat faster than she could blink. There are 2 dragons you can nom on when you are ready. All right, see you later, bye. And before the 2 twitching hands can wrap around my throat, I disappear from the tower in its entirety. General POV. Minthara stared at the suddenly empty space for a brief moment before shaking her head, an unbidden smile forming on her face as she once more sprawled herself on the luxurious seat. She had missed the damn elf, and the annoying fucker probably knew it too. Oddly enough, she found that she wasn't all that annoyed by that fact. Once I was securely hidden within my fortified chambers, high up in the tower, accessible and visible only through my own invitation, I finally allowed myself to relax, immediately throwing myself into the large pool filled with clear, warm water and allowing myself to float and let the tension leave me. I fully expected the earlier barrage of questions not to wait until she was rested, so I made myself available. Trying to relax while there was a frustrated demi-goddess out and about searching for you was just not going to end well no matter what, so it was best to get it out of the way. Then again, she was far more mature than earlier, so maybe I should raise my expectations a little bit. People in this world stopped being dumb real quick, or they died, and she has failed to do the latter as of yet. Still, as I floated idly, my mind refused to shut down, so I let it drift toward the fruits of my labor in metaphorically ass-clapping a literal god with my glowing magic stick. Damn, if he could read my mind, I think he would probably burst a blood vessel. Stock to 36 to 39 to 43. Dex 38 to 44 to 48. Vit 55 to 62 to 67. Mind 60 to 65 to 69. Mag 1250 to 1400 to 1500. I could also feel it, deep in my bones, the certainty of my blood growing more potent at denying the divine. The affirmation of hurting a god descended on Nirn served to bolster my inherent powers even further. The change was not massive, but it was there. The feeling didn't end there, however, as I also felt myself standing at some kind of precipice. Only one push more was needed for my inherited power to transform into something greater, and I could not wait to see what kind of fuckery that would cause. Damn, I let out a whistle. I am slowly turning into a monster. The flaming bird, who was until now lazily napping at the edge of the pool, looks up and gives me the stink eye, as if you weren't one already. Uh-huh. I deadpan without looking at him. Let a man enjoy his growth, why don't you? You are not a man, though, he points out helpfully. Semantics, you know what I mean. I wave him off. Why are you so grouchy today, anyway? Oh, I don't know. Scorch looks at me like I am an idiot. Maybe because you wouldn't let me peck the featherless cunt in the eye while he was ripping you a new one. Fucker literally eats souls. I point out, I have no idea what would happen if he were to nom on your feathery ass and I wasn't about to risk finding out. Yeah, I know, he agrees reluctantly, just annoyed by it. Fair enough. I shrug, accidentally letting myself sink a bit in the process and getting some water in my nose, which then leads to a full minute of being annoyed with the uncomfortable sting of it. After I glared at the guiltless pool for a while, my thoughts once more drifted to my training. My swordsmanship was getting better slowly and steadily under Gelibor's tutoring. I may not like the Mer all that much considering his general passivity, but his millennia of life had made him into a formidable master of the blade, something I had no qualms about using to its fullest potential. He was not a harsh trainer, but he was certainly rigid in his way of doing things, which usually ended up with me repeating a form thousands of times before he was satisfied, and I was still not quite there when it came to mastery. Finding a master at the use of polearms was a much more daunting prospect, however. There were many passable ones out there, but none who were either willing or able to give me proper instruction. So that was stalling quite a bit, unfortunately. The less said about my progress in non-magic assisted archery, the better. As for my magic lessons, I continued assisting the other masters with their own projects, using their insight to advance my own research as I did so, and getting a lesson or two in the process. The other Archmagi were slowly approaching a breakthrough in their Dragon Slayer project, and with the aid of Krine and myself, the whole thing had evolved beyond merely allowing someone of lesser power to hurt a dragon to downright cursing them in a sense similar to Dragon Rend. I could practically taste the implied immortal slaying magic that would follow, and it made me all kinds of giddy. Valerica's lessons were still a relative rarity, both she and Serana being far too busy with ensuring their hold over the province in the eyes of other vampires and spending the rest repairing their castle. Still, we did manage to get a couple of lessons in, and I had her teach me how to enhance my summons in the middle of a fight. She could have taught me actual necromancy, but I felt like that would be a massive waste of time considering I would never use it, so I focused on what I was already good at. As my previous display might indicate, I had also invested some time in increasing my destructive capabilities, for when a dragon tries being peppy about their fucking magic resistance. Thus, I found myself in Savos's chambers, demanding the old man get out of his cave and teach me shit for once. He pretended to grumble, but was in truth happy that we got to spend some time together, learning how to disintegrate things into pure magicka was also a plus. My meditations with Crine also continued, but to my great annoyance, the old dragon insisted I focus on solidifying my foundations, as my pronunciation was terrible, and my accent outright insulting to the refined ears of a Dover. Part of me believed he just wanted to fuck with me at first, but after a few weeks of his lessons, I noticed that the strain I put myself under when shouting was greatly reduced, and I could chain more and more shouts before my throat gave out. I would definitely remain a skeptic, but this once I could agree that trusting in the wisdom of the ancients was a good thing. And finally, my skill at mysticism was slowly approaching mastery. Shalazar was as always far too willing to teach, and I absorbed his lessons like a sponge, focusing on the aspect of manipulating the space around me as a first step toward my final goal of exploring far beyond merely this one world. I could feel it in my bones. I just had to get more practice in, and I could soon proclaim myself a true master mystic, with all the annoying squeaking that would no doubt follow said achievement. It would be worth it though, for once I was finally done with that I could finally get to researching the book I got for offing Harkon. Shalazar took one good look at the damn thing and immediately forbade me from touching it until I had his approval. And while I may be a rebellious little shit, if the almighty lizard wizard gives you an order, you follow the damn order. The book sat there, on a glass case, glaring at me with its simple yet elegant covers, inviting me to open it. "I will get you, you fucker, just you wait." "You really need some help," Scorch comments from atop my head. Wordlessly, I grab him and slam him into the water, making the whole thing steam up in the process. Ah, blessed silence. Middle number is his progress between the last system prompt and the Alduin fight, while the last one is after the fight. Name Raven, House Dagoth, age 20, race Dunmer, sign Mage, star 43, dex 48, vit 67, mind 69, mag 1500, 4000. Mage, destruction, master, pyromancy, electromancy, cryomancy, runecasting, siege magic, disintegration, elemental malleability, restoration expert, healing, solar magic, combat wards, alteration master, telekinesis, self-alteration combat enhancement, dragon skin, light spells, metal transformation transmutation, corporeal transmutation, aeromancy, terramancy, hydromancy, hemomancy, conjuration expert, bound weapons, soul-bound items, umbramancy, bound shades, shackled reach, chittering swarm, the changed ones, or 1326 slots. Oblivion storage, familiar summon, scorch, minion enhancement. Mysticism, expert, soul manipulation, levitation, spatial manipulation, elemental resistance. Sight beyond sight. Illusion expert, sound alteration, wide-scale emotional manipulation. Enchantment master, enchanting mastery, Dwematech expert, alchemy adept, standard potions and poisons, Moabane regeneration potions, expert tongue, fire breath, Yol, Tor, Shul, unrelenting force, Fus, Ro, Dar, whirlwind sprint, Vuld, slow time, Teed, become ethereal, Fime, dragon rend, Jor Zar Frul, clear skies, Lokvar Kur, warrior, sword expert, spear, polearm expert, dagger adept, thief, sneak adept. Abilities, summon ancestral guardian, racial. Magnus's gaze, once per month you may use your newfound connection. To the eye of Magnus to channel its power directly, this power may be used for 1 second per 10 points of vitality, without causing permanent damage to the user. Traits: Fireblood. Born under the fire of Red Mountain, you are blessed with 50% resistance and 20% damage and control toward fire. Blood of Dagoth. You descend from a mad religious extremist who nonetheless achieved a degree of godhood, providing you with a prolonged lifespan and the third eye trait. All-seeing third eye. Kind's Blessing, Minor Warrior's Blessing, Dunmer Paragon, Nordic Paragon, Greater Falmer Paragon, Ashen Bond, Night Vision, Dagoth's Fury. Your blasphemous inheritance has grown in strength and power. You now have the ability to dampen and even completely cut off divine and Daedric influence if sufficiently enraged. Chosen of Mephala, Unbound. You are now considered a lesser blank slate. As long as you invest great effort, you will be able to continue growing in strength. Abilities hitherto considered impossible are now attainable through great sacrifice and greater effort. The bindings of your race are less stringent, allowing you abandon your roots or refine them with sufficient effort. Fire Attunement, True Destruction, Solar. You have reached the pinnacle of mortal power with the element of fire. All fire spells are twice as strong while being half as demanding. Dover Thur, you are the lord of a dragon without being one yourself. The very act and manner of binding a being of such power and dominant nature has caused a bleed over from you to your new vassal, attuning it to yourself and your powers and shifting it from its original affinities to more resemble your own. Features: Telepathic Link, Increased Shadow Affinity, Increased Sun Affinity. Blessing of Akatosh Auriel, the chief divine of both elven and human pantheons, has granted you his favor. Your affinity toward the sun is increased even further, and you gain an affinity toward time and a resistance towards temporal effects. Gear: the 10 rings, a set of synchronized rings created by a true master of his craft. The Greater Hand of Magnus provides 2 additional units of magicka per everyone held by the wielder, up to 2,500. Rings of Sun and Shade. All magic is 50% cheaper to cast. Hagbane, a weapon much changed, yet the blood of fallen foes still clings to its form out of sight. All spells intended to harm are 25% more powerful when channeled through this staff. The blade erupts with disintegrating fire and lightning when striking a foe. Grand Regalia of Dagoth. A suit of robe and armor fit for a demigod, it shall protect the heir of Dagoth better than any army ever could. Lightened ebony plate. Self-cleaning, self-repairing, heat-regulating. Obscures clairvoyance or other methods of scrying. Magicka regeneration, 500%. Magicka absorption, 250. All bolstering spells are thrice as effective. Emergency effect. Uses up all of the robe's energy to force the wearer to turn ethereal for a single second. Renders the robe powerless for a day. Amulet of Dagoth, 20% magic resist. War Crown of Kogaroon. A crown fit for a lord among sorcerers, infused with the soul of an ancient necromancer. Queen of Divine Blood, this crown is one that even Daedra would covet. Royal Guard. Satisfies the magicka needs of up to 26 powerful bound creatures on its own. Draconic Aspect. The tiny strand of Akatosh's power empowers the wearer's voice while at the same time allowing for greater Thuum to be used without risk. Draconic Defenses. Resist all damage, 10%. Dread Aura. All shall bow. Ebony Blade. Unleashed. Mephala's prime artifact. Once the blade of the betrayer, and now the blade of ambition in the hands of her chosen. She watches all your deeds with great attention. Mephala's favor grants you power over lies of all forms. Life Drinker steals great amounts of life force from victims, can be used to heal and power spells and rituals. Shadow Guide teaches you how best to wield it. The Staff of Magnus. The staff belonging to the god and the very source of all magic. It is sent forth to champions in times of need and leaves its wielder some time after its purpose has been completed. Complete Control grants the wielder supreme control over magicka. Grand Siphon uses power from the very air to charge itself and the spells cast through it. Lordly Conduit. All spells cast are perfected to an extent. Spellbane. Destructive spells cast through the staff destroy magic and destabilize magicka. The Changed Ones. A unit of 10 eternally loyal elven spell swords. They fight as one for their great lord. Upkeep slots, 10. The Blade of Blasphemy. A blade once carrying the sun's radiance, now usurped by mortal hands. It shall forever carry the taint of such a deed. Vorpal Blade. The smallest cut becomes grievous injury. Bane of Undead. A mere touch destroys all but the strongest of undead. Rule Breaker. No binding survives the strike of this weapon. The Shroud of Raven. An item not meant for mortal hands, yet one made by them. None may observe the bearer against their will, while they are covered in its silken grasp. Self-repairing, soul-bound, intangible, eternal. Light Eater. The shroud will consume anything that might make the bearer noticeable, whether it be light or sound, in such a way as to make physically detecting the bearer near impossible. Hallowed Seclusion. Any kind of metaphysical sense is blocked completely. From mere magic sight to conceptual detection, not even death itself will find the bearer while hidden under the shroud. Soul Shroud. The bearer's soul is intangible to all and cannot be interacted with without their express permission. Auriel's Bow. The sun shall burn away the wicked. All arrows loosed from this bow deal massively increased damage against any creature which might be considered dark or wicked. The effect is further increased if the arrows are properly sun-hallowed.